Chapter 827. Qihan's tone was calm. I'm just a messenger. I've never interacted with you before. However, I've been in Shilling City for many years and have indeed seen you a few times. I didn't expect you to still remember me. Jian Fengqi was the tyrant of Shilling. Many people had seen him before. Even if they hadn't seen him personally, they must have heard many rumors about him. Especially his icy blue eyes. They were the symbol of the Jian family of Dragon Teeth Mountain. Who didn't know that? Jian Fengqi narrowed his eyes and smiled. That's not what I meant. Please forgive my stupidity. I don't know what you mean. If there's anything, please enlighten me. Qihan had already vaguely guessed something, but he didn't show any panic on his face. He just asked with a calm expression. They were the 13 guards after all. If they couldn't even handle this, they would be too useless. Jian Fengqi crossed his arms and touched his chin with one hand. He seemed to be deep in thought and his smile deepened. I don't know why, but I feel that you're very familiar when I see you. We seem to know each other. You must be joking, young Master Jian. My status is lowly. How could I have the chance to know you? Yes, I've never needed to send messages outside Heaven's canopy. I've never interacted with you before. You look very similar to an old friend of mine. Jian Fengqi raised his brows. There's also a Qi in his name. Don't you think it's a coincidence? Qihan's pupils constricted. He had already changed his appearance. Even if Jiang Yuqing was standing here, he wouldn't be able to recognize him. However, Jian Fengqi could. Because Jian Fengqi was more familiar with the 13 guards than Jiang Yuqing. Especially Qihan. Jian Fengqi always had a bone to pick with Shangguanyu in the past. He liked to find trouble with them whenever he had nothing to do. Every time this happened, Qihan would rush up to him and compete with him. Qihan's cultivation level was higher than Jian Fengqi's. However, Jian Fengqi was a celestial physician and would occasionally give him medicine. Both of them had their victories and defeats, so it was basically a draw. As a result, they naturally understood each other better. Although Qihan's face was always cold, he was loyal to Shangguanyu. Every time he encountered something related to Shangguanyu, he would not hold back. His courage and hot-bloodedness were all dedicated to the one person he was following. It was also because of this temperament that when they rushed back to the West Hill and saw the fire burning in the royal family's ancestral hall, he ignored everyone's obstruction and rushed in, finally burning his face. Now that he saw Jian Fengqi again, it was within his expectations that he would be able to guess who he was. However, this was not a good time to reveal his identity. What is young Master Jian trying to say? Qihan frowned. Seeing the two of them talking, the two guards couldn't help but look over from time to time. Jian Fengqi suddenly smiled. It's nothing. It's just that I feel that you're quite suitable for this young master. Qihan was stunned. Jian Fengqi's expression clearly indicated that he had already confirmed his identity, but why was he helping him to cover it up? Jian Fengqi suddenly threw a heavy bag over and Qihan caught it. This is 1,000 white crystal coins. Help me do something today and this money is all yours. Qihan was even more puzzled, but he still asked. What does young Master Jian want this little one to do? Jian Fengqi blinked. I'm going to Chunfeng restaurant. Come with me. Qihan never expected that Jian Fengqi would spend so much money just to make a trip to Chunfeng restaurant with him. It was only when the two of them arrived at the entrance of Chunfeng restaurant that Qihan was sure that Jian Fengqi wasn't joking with him. Let's go. Seeing Qihan standing at the entrance with an indescribable expression, Jian Fengqi laughed wildly in his heart. If this was in the past, Qihan would definitely have fought with him directly. Unfortunately, they were in public now. Due to his identity, he could only listen to Jian Fengqi's orders obediently. Qihan's voice was several degrees colder, and the air around him was so cold that it could freeze people to death. Young Master Jian, you don't have to joke about this, right? What exactly do you want to do? Just tell me. Jian Fengqi saw that Qihan's feet seemed to be nailed to the ground, and he refused to take a step forward no matter what. He almost laughed out loud. Chunfeng restaurant is a place that countless men in West Hill yearn for. Why do you seem to be avoiding it like it's a snake or a scorpion? You'll know what you want when you follow me in. Qihan's face was tense. If not for the fact that he was worried that Jian Fengqi would reveal his identity, he definitely wouldn't have tolerated his impudence. However, to let him enter this kind of place was indeed akin to torture. At this moment, Madame Zhang had already seen Jian Fengqi's figure from inside the restaurant. She hurriedly came out to welcome him, shaking with laughter. "Oh, isn't this young Master Jian? You haven't been here for a while. The girls have been missing you." A trace of disdain appeared on Qi Han's face. In West Hill City, who didn't know that Chun Feng Restaurant was Jian Fengqi's second home? He had lived here longer than he had in Dragon Teeth Mountain. However, Jian Fengqi didn't find it shameful. Instead, he was proud of it. He was cheerful every day as if he was enjoying himself in a drunken stupor. Jian Fengqi didn't need to turn around to know what kind of expression Qi Han was using to look at him. Swish, he opened his folding fan and a carefree smile appeared on his face. "A day without little Lu feels like 3 years. Aren't I here now?" Madame Zhang was a discerning person. When she was inside, she saw Jian Fengqi talking to the young man behind him, and they seemed to be quite familiar with each other. Therefore, after greeting Jian Fengqi, Madame Zhang immediately walked towards Qi Han with an eager smile. "Oh, this young master is really handsome. How come I haven't seen you before? Is this your first time here at Chun Feng Restaurant?" Qi Han quickly avoided Madame Zhang's actions, and the aura around him became even colder. Madame Zhang's action missed and she felt a little awkward. She subconsciously looked at Jian Fengqi. "Ah, Madame Zhang, this is my friend. However, he came with me today. I'm here so you don't have to worry. Go and invite little Luer over. You don't have to wait on anything else." Madame Zhang saw that Jian Fengqi was so protective of this young man, and her attitude became even more courteous. Yes, please come in." With that, she immediately ran to find Shui Lu. Qi Han's eyes flickered when he heard Shui Luer's name. Jian Fengqi raised his chin. "Let's go." Qi Han paused for a moment and finally followed her in. The two of them arrived at Jian Fengqi's private room. It was daytime and there weren't many people in Chun Feng Restaurant. Moreover, it was very common for Jian Fengqi to come here, so they didn't attract much attention. Besides, perhaps because Jian Fengqi had already told them to stay away, no one came to disturb them after that. Inside the room it was quiet. Jian Fengqi leaned lazily on the small couch, and his lips curled into a wicked smile. "Long time no see, Qi Han." The best reading experience came from the Love Network. Chapter 828. As expected, he had already recognized him. Qi Han's heart skipped a beat, but because he had already guessed it, he quickly calmed down. Since this layer of window paper had already been broken, there was no need to continue acting. Qi Han went straight to the point and asked, "Why did you call me here today?" A look of surprise flashed across Jian Fengqi's eyes and he sat up straight. "You admitted just like that? I thought I would have to spend a lot of effort before you would admit it." Qi Han frowned and a trace of impatience appeared in his eyes. "You have already confirmed my identity in your heart. No matter how I explain, you will not change your mind, right? If you have something to say, just say it. I'm very busy." "You are still as impolite as before." Jian Fengqi shrugged and did not intend to beat around the bush. "When did you return to West Hill?" Qi Han's voice was cold and hard. "It has nothing to do with you." Jian Fengqi choked and his eyelids twitched. Why was it that after such a long time Qi Han's bad temper was still the same as before? But when he thought of the 13U's current situation, Jian Fengqi suppressed his anger and swallowed back the words he wanted to say. "Jiang Yuqing's killing order has not been revoked yet and you came back so boldly? Could it be that you are here to die?" This was not a joke. Jiang Yuqing had made up his mind to exterminate the 13U. It was too dangerous for Qi Han to appear in West Hill so openly. Although he had changed so much that ordinary people would not be able to recognize him, what if? It was absolutely impossible for a person to completely change into another person. His identity might be exposed at any time. Besides, the person they were going to face was Jiang Yuqing, who already had a lot of power in his hands. "I have my own plans." Qi Han's answer was extremely brief, and he had no intention of continuing the conversation. In actual fact, if it weren't for the fact that Her Highness trusted Jian Fengqi, Qi Han wouldn't even have said those words. Jian Feng, he rubbed his temples as he had a headache. There were 13 people in the 13U sect. Why did he have to meet Qi Han, who was the most difficult to deal with? Any random person would be easier to talk to than Qi Han. But it was useless to think about it now. Jian Fengqi silently persuaded himself in his heart again as he tried his best to ask calmly, "Why are you still here? Have you been to country Yaochen before? This time Chi-Han did not hide anything. Not bad. Jian Fengqi narrowed his eyes. It was possible that the 13 Yu guards had escaped from Heaven's Canopy and gone to various places. It wasn't strange that Chi-Han had been to Yaochen. However, there was something wrong with the time and place of his appearance. Jian Fengqi remembered it very clearly. At that time, it was the day of the mutiny in the imperial capital of Yaochen. The imperial palace was in chaos. Swords flashed and flames soared into the sky. Why did Chi-Han go there to join in the fun? Thinking of the previous letter, Jian Fengqi asked tentatively, "You know Chu Luyue?" If they did not know each other, given Chi-Han's personality, he would definitely not have said those words. Even if he was using Qin Chi's identity now, he would not care so much about a letter from a stranger's home. Chi-Han nodded calmly. Jian Fengqi was a smart person and they knew each other very well. There was no need to lie. Does she know your identity? Jian Fengqi's expression became more serious. Of course she doesn't know, Chi-Han said calmly. We met by chance when we were at Yaochen. She only knows that I'm here to replace Qin Chi's identity, but she doesn't know anything else. Jian Fengqi felt that something was wrong, but he could not say it out loud. The two of them fell into silence. After a while, Chi-Han frowned. If you called me here today to ask about this, can you leave now that I have said it? Before Jian Fengqi could speak, a sweet and gentle female voice suddenly sounded from the side. No. Chi-Han's eyes flickered when he heard this and he turned to look. Shui happened to walk in. She was wearing a green dress today and a white jade hairpin in her hair. She looked elegant and refined. Her every move was more like a young lady raised by an aristocratic family. She walked toward the two of them and stood beside Chi-Han. Her lips curled into a smile and a hint of natural charm appeared in her eyes. Chi-Han, why are you leaving so soon? We haven't had the time to have a good chat. Chi-Han pursed his lips slightly. He did not have any ill intentions toward Shui Lu. I'm in a hurry. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask. Shui Lu sighed. Tell me first. Was the person at Xiaohou residence a few days ago you? Chi-Han paused and did not speak. Shui Lu smiled helplessly. If you don't trust the two of us, we'll tell you first. The expression on her face was much more restrained as she said seriously, I can tell you that I went to Xiaohou residence a few days ago. Speaking of which, I have to thank you for luring Xiaohou Rong and the others away that day. You saved me a lot of trouble. Chi-Han glanced at Shui Lu. The two of them looked at each other. Shui Lu said frankly, You're right. You are right. The 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill is with me now. Dahuang Swamp. The sky was bright. Chu Luyue and the others ran all the way from the Mystic Forest and finally reached the border connected to Mirror Lake. The weather was clear and there were no clouds for thousands of miles. Mirror Lake was calm. Occasionally the wind would blow and create ripples. All the scenery was reflected in the Mirror Lake like a beautiful painting. Chu Luyue immediately saw the dancing lotus swaying gently in the center of the lake. The pinkish-white translucent petals looked like high-quality jade under the sunlight. There was even a thin layer of crystal-clear light. Chu Luyue patted Dumpling's head gently and was about to go over. Yi Ranran quickly said, Luyu, wait. Chu Luyue looked at her and saw a hint of worry on Yi Ranran's face. Luyu, the dancing lotus is a top-grade heavenly treasure. Won't it be unsafe to take it rashly? She was also a celestial physician. It was impossible for her not to desire the dancing lotus. After all, some people might not even see it once in their lifetime. However, it was also because of this that Yi Ranran was even more worried. Chu Luyue chuckled. Don't worry. I know how to take it. Yi Ranran was relieved when he saw her confident expression. Then be careful. Chu Luyue nodded. I'll be back soon. Then Dumpling spread her wings and flew up. She was extremely fast. Soon she reached the center of Mirror Lake and hovered above the dancing lotus. Chu Luyue glanced at the dancing lotus and bit her index finger. A dark red bead of blood immediately gushed out. Then Dumpling bent down. Chu Luyue stretched out her hand and reached for the dancing lotus. Crack. A crisp sound was heard. Digression. Everyone should know that the recent review has been very strict. I've done a second self-review today. A small part of the content at the beginning has been modified, but it won't affect the reading. I'm now writing while changing the text. Please forgive me. At about 7 p.m. mobile phone users, Please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 829. When the green stalk came into contact with the blood on Chu Liyue's fingertip, it immediately snapped. Then the dancing lotus quietly flew up and landed in Chu Liyue's hand. Chu Liyue looked at the dancing lotus lying quietly in her palm with a blank expression. What was going on? She hadn't moved much just now. How did this thing come to her on its own? Although she had never seen the dancing lotus with her own eyes before, she had read about it in ancient books. According to the books, it should be drawn with fresh blood. In short, it was quite troublesome. She had made ample preparations in case something went wrong. But now it seemed like all her efforts were in vain. Chu Liyue blinked and realized that the drop of blood on her finger had silently seeped into the stalk. The 5 petals closed naturally. It still looked fresh, clear and beautiful. From the looks of it, the plucking was very successful. Although she didn't actually do anything. In the distance, Mu Hongyu and the others were closely watching the situation in the center of the lake. They were a little confused when they saw Chu Liyue reach out and grab the dancing lotus. Mu Hongyu raised her hand and asked curiously, Ran, didn't you say that the dancing lotus was very troublesome and dangerous to pluck? Why does it seem to me that Lu Yu is very relaxed? Yi Ran was also shocked. I don't know either. Their master had mentioned this herb before. At that time he had specially warned them not to rush forward blindly if they encountered it. Otherwise they might not even know how they died. However, Chu Liyue did seem to have easily plucked the dancing lotus. They waited nervously for a moment, but nothing strange happened around them. Chu Liyue jumped directly onto Dumpling's back. The master and servant were back in the blink of an eye. Are you okay? Yi Ran could not help but ask. At the same time his gaze fell on the dancing lotus in Chu Liyue's hand. It lay there quietly like an ordinary flower. Chu Liyue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I'm fine. To think that she had done so much preparation just now. So it's actually so easy to obtain an offensive heavenly treasure like the dancing lotus? Yi Ran murmured with a puzzled expression. Chu Liyue was also very confused. This dancing lotus was very gentle towards her. It had even taken the initiative to break off and give it to her. She also seemed to have an inexplicable sense of closeness to it. It was as if this was supposed to be hers. This feeling was so subtle that Chu Liyue didn't know how to explain it. After thinking about it, she could only say, maybe I'm just lucky. After saying that, she glanced at the dancing lotus again. Then she took out a jade box and carefully placed it inside. What's that? Mu Hongyu suddenly exclaimed and looked in front in shock. The few of them turned around to look. Yi Ran sucked in a breath of cold air and widened her eyes. Lei Laosi couldn't help but swear. F***ck. What's going on? Even the usually calm Qin Yi squinted his eyes slightly. Chang Wanzhou seemed to have thought of something and frowned. Chu Liyue also turned around to look. This glance directly stunned her on the spot. She saw another dancing lotus slowly growing on the vast surface of the water. It was beautiful and moving, swaying gracefully. It was already extremely rare to see one dancing lotus. Who would have thought that after Chu Liyue plucked one, another one would pop out from the mirror lake? Even Chu Liyue was stunned when she saw this scene. What's going on? Could it be that there were originally 2 dancing lotuses here? It's just that only one came out previously and this one just came out? However, the moment Chu Liyue said that, the few of them saw another dancing lotus slowly appearing beside the first one. Including the one in Chu Liyue's hands, this was already the 3rd one. However, this wasn't the end. In the next hour, dozens of dancing lotuses actually started growing in the mirror lake one after another. The sun shone down, the water rippled and the pinkish-white flowers swayed with the wind. It was tranquil and moving. Anyone who saw this scene would have to sigh in admiration. However, at this moment, the few of them were no longer in the mood to admire this scene. They were only filled with shock. As the dancing lotuses gradually appeared, the few of them gradually fell silent. The surroundings were silent. Chu Liyue stared at the swaying dancing lotus, and something suddenly flashed across her mind. She was dazed for a moment. This scene, I seem to have seen it before? And for some reason, when she saw so many dancing lotuses appearing together, although she was very surprised when she saw it, she wasn't shocked in the depths of her heart. It seemed that she had seen more before. She closed her eyes, trying to recall the scene that had appeared in her mind just now, but she couldn't remember it. However, that familiar feeling was getting stronger and stronger. After a while, Chu Luiwei opened her eyes and stared at the scene in front of her with a complicated look in her eyes. If this feeling wasn't an illusion, then what exactly had she experienced in the past to see so many dancing lotuses and to be so accustomed to it? They said that she had forgotten some things, then what exactly had she forgotten? Digression. Change the text to autistic. Tomorrow at 12 o'clock. Woo mobile phone users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 8:30. When all the dancing lotuses appeared, countless light spots suddenly fell from the sky and formed a faint light screen. That light screen surrounded the entire mirror lake in half. One half was as usual and the water was calm, while the other half seemed to be covered by a layer of fog and everything became blurry. Even the clusters of dancing lotuses seemed to have become much more distant. From where Chu Luiwei and the rest were standing, they could only see the blurry shadows on the light screen. If someone else came, it would be very difficult for them to recognize the dancing lotuses at the back. What's going on? Lei Laosi scratched his head in confusion and instinctively looked at Qin Yi, only to see that Qin Yi was also frowning. The two of them had guarded the mystic forest for close to 2 years. Other than the Red Moon Desert, they basically didn't go there much, but they were quite familiar with the other places. They had come to this mirror lake more than 10 times, but they had never seen such a scene before. Chu Luiwei watched this scene with a serious gaze. For some reason she felt like someone was protecting all the dancing lotuses. I just don't know who has such heaven-defying means. These are extremely precious dancing lotuses. Normal people might not even see them once in their entire lives, but there are so many of them here. She held her breath and looked at the thin layer of light screen. There seemed to be specks of gold on it, but they disappeared in an instant and couldn't be seen clearly. If these dancing lotuses really belonged to one person, why did that person let me take another one? Chu Luiwei suppressed the many doubts in her heart. It seems like we can't casually take the remaining ones. Let's go first. Once she said that, the others expressed their agreement. These dancing lotuses might be extremely precious, but this scene was indeed a little too shocking. For safety's sake, it was better to leave as soon as possible. Anyway, Chu Luiwei had already successfully brought back one, so it would be too greedy to ask for more. Yi Ranran let out a long sigh and sighed. We can finally go back. Chu Luiwei paused for a moment. Oh right, there's something I haven't told you guys yet. I might not be able to go back with you guys for the time being. Once she said that, the few of them were very shocked. You're not going back with us? Why? Do you have something to do here, Luyu? The joy and excitement on Yi Ranran's quickly disappeared, and a tinge of disappointment. She took a step forward and asked with a frown on her round face. If you have any trouble, we'll accompany you here, okay? She had already imagined the scene of her returning to Chongsu cabinet with Luiwei and the rest many times in her heart. The pavilion master and the others didn't know what was going on here, and they might think that Lu Yu is. If they could return together, the pavilion master and the others would definitely be pleasantly surprised. Chu Luiwei hesitant. Those few people only said that she could head to the Red Moon Desert after she got out, but they didn't mention whether the others could. But they had something to do with the memory she had lost. More importantly, it was Shangguan Yu's memory. No matter what, she couldn't expose her identity. She shook her head gently. It's just a small matter. I can handle it myself. So many of us haven't gone back yet. Master and the others must be very worried. You guys go back first and let them feel at ease. I'll be back soon. However, these words obviously couldn't make them feel at ease. Chang Wanzhou, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said, I'll be wherever you are. His tone was as calm and cold as usual, but there was a hint of stubbornness in it. Mu Hongyu Chu Luiwei nodded. That's right. Luyu, we've already waited for so many days. What's the difference in waiting for a little while longer? We can take care of each other if we're together, right? After the previous experience, they still had lingering fears. Chu Luiwei might be able to escape safely, but Da Huang Swamp was full of danger. Who could guarantee that they would return safely in the end? They couldn't be at ease. How could Chu Luiwei not know their worries? Seeing that they couldn't be persuaded, Chu Luiwei pondered for a moment. Since that's the case, follow me first, Qin Yi suddenly asked. Where are we going? Chu Luiwei pursed his lips and looked in the direction of Red Moon Desert. There. Chunfeng Restaurant. The room was silent. Qihan didn't expect Shui Lu to be so honest and directly admit that the 9 clouds yuan recovery pill was with her. It was needless to say how precious this item was. No one in the Tianling dynasty would dare to say a word about it if they obtained it. Yet Shui Lu said it so straightforwardly. The person that day was indeed me. Qihan kept quiet for a moment and finally nodded. Shui Lu's originally nervous expression eased up a lot. Since Qihan dared to say this, it meant that he was willing to let down his guard and communicate with them. This would naturally make things much more convenient. Why did you steal that item? Qihan continued to ask. Shui Lu chuckled. Actually, this matter is also a coincidence. I had planned to do this for a long time, but I didn't expect you to be there that night. As she spoke, she asked curiously, "Oh, right. By the way, are you also going for that thing?" Qihan shook his head. No. He started to investigate Xiahou Rong because he had some suspicions about him. In fact, during this period of time he would sneak into the Xiahou residence whenever he was free. His hard work paid off and he finally heard what he wanted to hear that day. It was just that he was too shocked and angry back then, so he was careless and made a sound. In the end, he had inadvertently helped Shui Lu at the right time. Originally, he wanted to wait for Her Highness to come back before doing this. After all, his identity was too sensitive and he had to be careful in all aspects. However, Her Highness still hadn't returned, and Shangguan Wan and Jiang Yuqing's wedding day was getting closer and closer. After thinking for a long time, he decided to investigate on his own first. Luckily, he finally got something. Shui Lu recalled what Xiahou Rong said back then, and the smile on her face faded. When the 13 Yu guards were lured away, Xiahou Rong played an important role in it. When I went to the Xiahou residence to check out the place, I happened to meet you. You should have known that Xiahou Rong betrayed Her Highness, right? A layer of coldness appeared on Qihan's face. That's right. That old thing betrayed Her Highness for his own selfish reasons. He deserves to be punished. Did you get the evidence? Shui Lu remembered clearly that Xiahou Rong also mentioned forged documents and so on. Who is the other person? Do you know? Qihan opened his mouth but didn't say anything. He glanced at Jian Fengqi from the corner of his eyes. Jian Fengqi couldn't help but laugh. He leaned against the couch and waved his bone fan. He smiled lazily and said, "You still don't trust me? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 831. Qihan said coldly, "You know the reason." In the past, Jian Fengqi had always been keen on going against Her Highness. He would cause trouble for her every now and then. There were even a few times when he tried to stand up for Shangguan Wan and caused a ruckus with Her Highness. Which one of them was trustworthy? Looking at Jian Fengqi's face, Qihan could not completely dispel the grudge in his heart. He had only said those words because Shui Lu had taken the initiative to be honest with him. Jian Fengqi choked. He felt guilty and felt a headache coming on. He closed his fan and pressed the handle against his temple as he let out a long sigh. There are always times when people make mistakes. Besides, although I always went against Her Highness in the past, I have never done anything to let her down. I was well aware of how she treated me. Do you really think that I'm an ungrateful person? Jian Fengqi was speaking from the bottom of his heart. Disregarding everything else, just the fact that Shangguan Yu was willing to lend him so many unique manuscripts was enough to make him feel very grateful. One had to know that these manuscripts were priceless treasures to any celestial physician. Most people would not even be willing to share high-grade prescriptions with others. Some masters would even hold back when teaching their disciples, afraid that they would be surpassed. However, Shangguan Yu did not seem to have such concerns. As long as Jian Fengqi asked, Shangguan Yu would basically agree and generously lend those unique manuscripts to him. Although Jian Fengqi was unrestrained, he knew that he owed Shangguan Yu a lot of favors. The reason why he had always been in conflict with Shangguan Yu was actually a long story. Jian Fengqi had displayed his astonishing talent as a celestial physician when he was young. At that time, many people said that he was the #1 genius in the entire West Hill. He was proud by nature and had always thought so. However, Shangguan Yu was born later on. Her appearance was a great blow to the West Hill, no, to all the so-called geniuses of the Tianling dynasty. She was like a bright moon, shining brightly. No matter how outstanding other people were, compared to her, they were like stars beside the moon, inferior to her. Jian Fengqi was among them. He went from being the #1 celestial physician genius to being the #2 genius. At that time he was young and full of vigor. Jian Fengqi often ran to the palace to look for Shang Guanyu to compete. If he lost, he would go back and cultivate as hard as he could and make a comeback. If he wins, well, he had never won. Thinking of this, Jian Fengqi was still full of resentment. Who could withstand this? Everyone else had already accepted their fate. They knew that Shang Guanyu was an existence that couldn't be compared to. He didn't believe it. The result became worse and worse. He was almost depressed. In the end, Shang Guanyu took the initiative to say that she had the advantage because she had read more books. She then took the initiative to lend the basic ancient books to Jian Fengqi for him to read. Jian Fengqi didn't want to accept it first, but he couldn't take it anymore. In the end, he decided to endure the humiliation and read the books she gave him. He would compete with her after he finished reading. After that, the situation improved a lot. He could finally tie with Shang Guanyu occasionally. Gradually, Jian Fengqi formed this habit. Although he never took the initiative to say it, he was indeed very grateful to Shang Guanyu. Who knew that something would happen later on? If I really wanted to target you, I would have just told Jiang Yuqing about it. Why would I go through so much trouble to bring you here? Jian Fengqi felt that he was wronged. After thinking about it, he probably owed her in the past and now he was paying her back. Shui Lu also helped him. Qihan, I won't hide it from you. After the crown princess died, it was Jian Fengqi who found me and asked for my help to investigate the cause of her death. Hearing this, Qihan finally looked at Jian Fengqi in surprise. He didn't expect him to do such a thing. Shui Lu continued. Right now, you may not trust the two of us very much and we can understand that. But what we said today is the truth. The crown princess died mysteriously and we must find out the truth for her. If you don't mind, then let's work together from today onwards. Qihan frowned. He was in a difficult position. They obviously didn't know that Her Highness was still alive. But without a doubt, with their help, many things would be a lot more convenient. Shui'er had seen all kinds of people in Spring Breeze Brothel, especially the nobles in Xiling City. As long as she came here, she could get some information out of them. Who would be on guard against such a lowly and weak woman? Needless to say, Jian Fengqi was even more so. He was of noble status and had a flamboyant personality. He could do whatever he wanted in Xiling City. Basically, no one cared about what he wanted to do. There was a short moment of silence in the room. Then Jian Fengqi finally said, "If I say that I found out who poisoned Her Highness, will you agree to cooperate?" Qihan suddenly looked up. "What did you say?" Jian Fengqi smiled. He reached out his hand, dipped it in the water in the teacup beside him and wrote a name on the small table. Qihan saw it clearly. Jian Fengqi's hand burned and the water on the teacup instantly dried up. "Oh right, I forgot to tell you. Actually, it was this person who poisoned the crown princess." Qihan gritted his teeth and his expression was tense. How can you be sure? Do you have evidence?" Jian Fengqi blinked and smiled meaningfully. "Her Highness told me personally." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 832. It was nighttime in the palace. A black figure flashed and disappeared from Huayong Palace like a ghost. Her movements were silent and there was no fluctuation of force. Hence, it did not attract the attention of the guards. The moonlight shone down and the night was as cool as water. The surroundings were quiet. So much so that Shang Guanwan could clearly hear her own beating heart. She clutched her chest and pressed her body against the door. The blood in her body seemed to have frozen, bringing with it an icy aura. Her limbs were extremely stiff. She did not dare to breathe loudly. Her eyes were wide open and there was still a tinge of blood in her eyes. Her forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat and her lips were pale. If someone came in and saw her like this, they would definitely think that they had seen a ghost. Her mind was completely blank. Just now, look at you." A cold and hoarse voice sounded beside her ear, with a trace of contempt and disdain. "You only took a person's yuan meridian. Is there a need to be like this? It's useless." Shang Guanwan swallowed her saliva with difficulty. She wanted to suppress the fear in her heart, but it was no use. Everything that happened just now was still replaying clearly in her mind over and over again. She knew that she was a ruthless person. After so many years, in order to get to where she was today, what kind of methods had she not used? Even when she finished off all those people in the mystic forest, her expression did not change. But, even if she was like this when she thought of everything that happened just now, she could not help but feel a deep sense of fear. I don't... Shangwan wanted to defend herself, but the moment she opened her mouth, a thick smell of blood rushed up from her stomach. She almost vomited. She bent down and retched for a long time. Only when her face was red and her eyes were filled with tears, did she finally feel better. However, after this torment her body was almost exhausted. She slowly and weakly fell to the ground. If it was not for the enchantment that was set up in the room, this commotion would definitely attract people. A sneer sounded beside her ear. It's only the first day and you're already like this. I think there's no need to continue. No. Shangwan immediately reacted and shouted hurriedly. I'm fine. I can do it. Whatever you want me to do, I'll definitely do it well. You know what to do. After saying this, the voice disappeared. Shangwan took a few deep breaths and calmed herself down. The fear in her eyes slowly dissipated. What was left was a viciousness and determination. It wasn't easy for her to reach her current position, so no one could stop her. She sat cross-legged. She put her hands on her knees. She closed her eyes and began to absorb the Yuan meridian. The faint moonlight shone in. The bloodstains on her hands had almost dried up, and her nails seemed to be scraping her flesh. It looked very horrifying. Early the next morning, news spread from the Lingyun sect that a disciple had gone missing. Most importantly, this disciple was a genius with a Daijing Yuan meridian that they had just accepted this year. Unlike top sects like Dragon Teeth Mountain, Soaring Cloud sect did not have many Daijing Yuan meridian geniuses. The sudden disappearance of one of them caused quite a commotion. But there were many sects in Xiling City, and Soaring Cloud sect was one of the most inconspicuous ones. The disappearance of one person did not attract the attention of the people outside the sect. Perhaps he ran out on his own, or was delayed by something at the last minute. Even the people from the Soaring Cloud sect were optimistic, thinking that they would be able to find them soon. But after a day and night there were still no clues. Only then did the people of Soaring Cloud sect realize that something was wrong. They began to gather their strength and search from top to bottom. But they still found nothing. That disciple seemed to have evaporated into thin air and completely disappeared. But what was even more shocking was that a day later, another disciple of Soaring Cloud sect went missing. Also, he had a Daijing Yuan meridian. One might be an accident, but the other two were definitely intentional. There was a lot of discussion in Xiling City. They began to wonder if Soaring Cloud sect had offended someone to get revenge like this. And the other party had specifically targeted their most outstanding genius. This was undoubtedly a huge blow to Soaring Cloud sect. After this, the entire Soaring Cloud sect began to be under martial law. But 2 days later the same thing happened again. What annoyed Soaring Cloud sect the most was that they had set up layers of barriers, but the other party did not seem to care at all. They broke through easily. They did not even know who did it. After losing so many genius disciples in succession, Soaring Cloud sect master finally could not take it anymore and went to the palace to ask for help. The third princess sent a team of black cavalry over. Strangely enough, after the black cavalry went, nothing like this happened to Soaring Cloud sect again. For a time, everyone in Soaring Cloud sect was grateful to the third princess. And when the people in Xiling City heard this news, they also praised her. Previously, Shangwan was discussed a lot because she did not successfully retrieve the medicinal herbs needed for Her Majesty. When the princess was here, she could pacify Da Huang swamp. But when it came to the third princess, she could not even retrieve a few medicinal herbs. In comparison, the difference was like heaven and earth. Because of this, Shangwan's reputation was also affected. Now, relying on these matters in Soaring Cloud sect, she had recovered a little. However, there were still some people who secretly sighed. In the end, it was different from when the princess was here. No matter how one looked at it, the current third princess could not be compared to the princess. However, the current Tianling royal family only had one suitable candidate for the throne, and no one else could be chosen. If Her Majesty did not wake up, it would probably be like this in the future. Xiling was in a turbulent situation. Chu Luyue and the others, who were thousands of miles away, were busy heading to the Red Moon Desert. After a period of trekking, they finally arrived at the intersection of the three realms. Looking ahead, the golden desert stretched as far as the eye could see. Under the sunlight, It reflected a dazzling light. Heat waves rolled and even space seemed to be distorted. Just standing at the edge was already unbearably hot. If they entered, who knew how terrifying it would be? In the Red Moon Desert, all kinds of forces are mixed and the pressure is extremely heavy. Flying in the air will consume a lot of energy, so it's better to walk. Qin Yi looked at the desert in front of him, and a hint of seriousness appeared in his eyes. Dumpling had already shrunk to the size of a palm and was obediently squatting on Chu Liyue's shoulder. Chu Liyue nodded. There are many dangers in here, so everyone must be careful. Then she took the lead and walked forward. Just as her feet landed on the yellow sand, a surprised voice suddenly sounded in her ears. You're back. Hurry up and welcome her. Rustle, rustle. In the vast Red Moon Desert, a series of strange noises suddenly came from all directions. Digression, 6 o'clock mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 833. Something seemed to be surging under the desert and it was all heading toward Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue was stunned for a moment, then she felt something moving under her feet. She looked down and realized that the sand under her feet was moving rapidly. It was as if there was an invisible hand pulling her forward. Lu Yu. Several people shouted behind her. Chu Liyue hurriedly looked back, but was shocked to find that the figures of those people had already disappeared. Haha. They have already been sent to other places. If it weren't for you, they wouldn't have entered this place so easily. This was Diwu Zhang's voice. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. She was about to speak when she heard him continue. Don't worry, girl. Since they are your friends, we naturally won't hurt them. Only then did Chu Liyue relax and allow the yellow sand under her feet to send her into the depths of the Red Moon Desert. The closer she got, the clearer the clamor from before. The girl is back. Get out of the way, get out of the way. Don't block the way. Bah. Why are you so anxious? You're not anxious, but I am. Get out of the way. Let me see what this girl looks like now. Hearing the lively discussion about her, Chu Liyue's mood became very strange. Why did it seem like she was very popular here? It was no exaggeration to say that she simply had the illusion of returning home. However, she didn't see a single figure when she looked around. Only the yellow sand under her feet was moving continuously. And that sound seemed to be coming from below. Strange, she had come to the Red Moon Desert before, but she didn't see such a scene then. But now it seemed that those people weren't lying when they said that she liked to come to the Red Moon Desert the most. And it seemed that she had a deep relationship with this place. When other people came to Red Moon Desert, they had a hard time walking. However, it was very easy for Chu Liyue. She didn't even need to walk. The yellow sand under her feet automatically and quickly sent her forward. After a while, she finally stopped in front of an oasis. This was a clear and clean lake, and it was also the coolest and most comfortable place in this scorching hot desert. She took 2 steps forward, stood by the lake and saw her own reflection. The chatter by her ears disappeared in an instant, and she fell into a strange silence. After a moment, a slightly shrill voice exclaimed. Why does she look different? Upon hearing this, Chu Liyue instantly narrowed her eyes. It's her. This face to be her. Another voice, full of joy. Furthermore, the aura on her body is unique in this world. She is definitely you. It's her, it's her. Let me see. Let me see. Noises resumed in the surroundings. For a moment, Yayu didn't know whether you instead she was quite used. Chu Liyue stared at the lake. It was a light blue color and the water surface was sparkling. At a glance it looked like a huge sapphire. The breeze on the water surface seemed to carry a trace of coldness and sweetness. Alright, you've all seen. Let's disperse first. This time came here for proper business. Diwu Zhang's voice carried a trace of majesty. Ripples suddenly appeared on the surface of the water. The voices gradually dispersed with reluctance. Soon, the surface of the lake regained its tranquility. Chu Liyue was surprised and asked the lake surface tentatively, "What's the matter? Senior Diwu? Are you under here?" Diwu Zhangzi laughed. "You can say yes, but you can also say no. The entire Red Moon Desert is our territory. You can go anywhere. It's just that this place used to be your favorite, so we directly brought you here." Apart from not being able to leave the Red Moon Desert at will, they could do whatever they wanted here. Chu Liyue nodded thoughtfully. With their strength, it was normal for them to be able to do this. Girl, did you remember anything when you saw this? Diwu Zhangzi asked cautiously. Chu Luyue was stunned, then shook her head. Diwu Zhangzi paused and laughed again. It's fine. You just came here, so it's fine if you can't remember. After staying here for a long time, you might remember everything. Chu Luyue smiled faintly. Thank you, Senior Diwu. Actually, I also want to know what I've forgotten. She vaguely felt that it was very important content, but she didn't know where to start. It would be best if she could remember it here. What are you thanking him for? We haven't done anything yet. Lan Xiao snorted softly, then asked with slight disdain, Girl, it's been so long. Why are you still at the peak of stage 5? Chu Liyue was speechless. Mu Hongyu and the others were already very shocked to see her break through to this level. Even Chu Liyue felt that her breakthrough speed was already considered extremely fast. She didn't expect that there would be a day when she would be despised by others. From his tone, it seemed like she was a hopeless good-for-nothing. Actually, I can already break through to stage 6. Sai, you're still as worrisome as before. Stay here first and wait until you break through to stage 6 before you start training. Training? What training? Chu Liyue asked curiously. Naturally, it's the training you went through here before. Lan Xiao sighed. You must have forgotten all those. Learn from the beginning. Chu Liyue was speechless. Why did she suddenly have a bad premonition? But Lan Xiao had already said it, so Chu Liyue didn't know how to react. She could only sit cross-legged and prepare to break through. Becoming a stage 6 warrior wasn't difficult for her now, and she could do it easily. However, a stage 6 warrior that was considered outstanding in the eyes of others might not even be considered a beginner in the eyes of these few people. Tianjing Yuan Meridian. Chu Liyue pursed her lips. She would tell everyone that even if she didn't have the Tianjing Yuan Meridian now, she would definitely not be worse than before. Seniors, please forgive my friends. Chu Liyue didn't have any other worries in her heart. She was just afraid that something would happen to those few people. A cold voice sounded. They are extremely lucky to be able to come in. If you have the time, you should think about how to improve your abilities. This was Dugumobao's voice. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. Senior, thank you for your guidance. With that, she immediately held her breath and prepared to break through. Lan Xiao said softly with dissatisfaction. Why are you so fierce to her? Isn't it just Rongxiu who broke your Xian formation again? Vent your anger on him. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 834. Dugu Mobao frowned and retorted. Rongxiu is Rongxiu and she is her. I'm not venting my anger on her. I'm just urging her to cultivate. Don't forget, she doesn't have the Tianjing Yuan Meridian anymore. If she wants to reach the same level of strength as before, she'll have to put in more than 10 times more effort than before. Lan Xiao and Diwu Zhangzi fell silent upon hearing this. How could they not know this? In fact, Dugu Maobao's statement was still a conservative one. The difference between the Tianjing Yuan Meridian and the Daijing Yuan Meridian was more than 10 times. It wasn't easy to start all over again. Although that's the case, don't you feel that there's something unusual in this girl's body? Diwu Zhangzi thought for a moment and couldn't help but ask softly. Haven't you thought about how she managed to subdue the 2 Tian baby? They didn't dig out the 2 Tian baby for her back then because they felt that the time wasn't right. One had to know that she was much stronger than she was now. But now she managed to subdue that thing with the strength of a stage 5 warrior. It was truly inconceivable. Now that you mention it, it does seem to be true. Although her realm isn't high now, her strength isn't weak. She might even have a few powerful trump cards. Lan Xiao agreed. Something that can deal with the 2 Tian baby can't be ordinary. Even in the entire Tianling dynasty, there might not be such a thing, right? In that case, although she doesn't have the Tianjing Yuan Meridian, she seems to have some other benefits. Dugu Maobao said calmly. No matter what treasure she has, her strength can't be worse than before. I'll leave those people to you. You must train them well. I don't want them to be burdens to this girl in the future. Diwu Zhangzi chuckled. Of course. I've already roughly checked the situation of those people just now. Hey, they're not bad at all. There's even a faint Yuan body among them. If you teach them well, they'll have a bright future. The friends that this girl likes are naturally good, Lan Xiao said lazily. Other than her bad taste in men, everything else is good. Oh right, Big Bao, you still have to continue training. I agree with Rongxiu, but I think little snowflake is very pitiful, so let it go. When it was still young and ignorant when it contracted with Rongxiu. Dugu Maobao snorted but didn't reply. Eventually the Red Moon Desert. Chu Luiyue meditated beside the lake as her aura surged. Soon the energy between heaven and earths. A vortex of a vortex directly above her head. Chu Luiyue shut her eyes tightly, and all the force in her body started circulating rapidly. Finally, snow sky she. Calm the ting. Big. Lin at this point, all of Chu Luiyue's attention was focused. She could even clearly feel that the invisible barrier of a rank 6 warrior was within reach. She made up her mind and controlled the force to hit the water droplet in her dantian. Whoosh. Like a wave crashing onto a reef, it surged violently. The 5 lines on the water droplet seemed to be affected and moved along with it. Chu Luiyue wasn't discouraged and tried again. Whoosh. The attack this time was stronger than before. The water droplet let out a buzzing sound. The lines on the water droplet fluctuated even more. The dark clouds in the sky gathered quickly and the sky darkened at a speed visible to the naked eye. Silver snake-like bolts of lightning swam through the thick layers of clouds. This girl is just about to break through to a rank 6 warrior. Why is there such a big commotion? Lan Xiao, who was waiting leisurely, was shocked when he noticed the change. Ordinary cultivators would only trigger the heaven and earth phenomenon when they break through to the rank 7 warrior realm. Even the most outstanding Daijing Yuan Meridian martial practitioners were rarely able to do this. If it was Yu in the past, this wouldn't be strange. But the key was that she didn't have the Tianjing Yuan Meridian now. There is indeed a problem with her Yuan Meridian. Dugu Maobao suddenly spoke. What problem? Lan Xiao was confused. She does have the Daijing Yuan Meridian now. They definitely wouldn't be wrong about this. I didn't say that she doesn't have the Daijing Yuan Meridian now. What I meant was that her Yuan Meridian is different from ordinary Daijing Yuan Meridian cultivators. Dugu Maobao muttered to himself and lowered his voice. If I didn't guess wrongly, her Yuan Meridian level has increased at least twice. What? This time even Lan Xiao was so shocked that he couldn't say anything for a while. All the cultivators in the world had different talents from birth. The difference in the level of the Yuan Meridian basically determined the level of talent. Of course, the level of the Yuan Meridian could be changed. But the requirements were very high and it was extremely difficult. And usually it could only be changed once. But Debao actually said that this girl's Yuan Meridian level had increased at least twice? How is this possible? A cultivator's Yuan Meridian can't withstand such torment. Of course it's impossible for ordinary people. But she's different. Maybe the Yuan Meridian in her body might not be worse than the Tianjing Yuan Meridian in the future. Lan Xiao seemed to have suddenly thought of something and took in a deep breath. You mean, Chu Luiyue didn't know about their reactions. She didn't dare to relax at all. After a short pause she tried for the 3rd time. This time when the force hit the water droplet, Chu Luiyue heard a crisp cracking sound. Bang! The barrier of a rank 6 warrior was finally broken by her. Immediately the surrounding heaven and earth energy started to flow into Chu Luiyue's limbs and bones at an even faster speed. Finally it all flowed into the water droplet. The 6th pattern finally appeared slowly. When Chu Luiyue was about to break through to a rank 6 warrior, Mu Hongyu and the rest who came with her had already split up. Diwu Zhangzi purposely didn't let them stay together. After all, these people all had their own specialties and it was best for them to train separately. The Red Moon Desert was vast and boundless, so they didn't have to worry about bumping into each other. As for Rongxiu, Diwu Zhangzi was even less worried. Dugu Maobao was watching. However, in these few years Rongxiu's strength had increased rapidly, and now even Debao had to put in more effort to deal with other people. I really don't know how he cultivates. Thus, in the Red Moon Desert, everyone split up and went through different tests. And in this process, their combat power also increased rapidly and silently. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 835. In the blink of an eye, a month's time had passed. There were only 5 days left before the wedding of 3rd Princess Shangguanwan and Jiang Yuqing. Logically speaking, everyone should be in a jubilant mood on such an auspicious day. However, the atmosphere in Xiling City was inexplicably gloomy and oppressive. Even the usually bustling streets were much more deserted. This was all because of a series of strange things that had happened in Xiling City recently. Many disciples of various sects had recently disappeared for no apparent reason. Most importantly, they were all cultivation geniuses with Daijing Yuan meridians. At first, 3 people from the Soaring Cloud sect went missing. Although everyone was surprised, they only thought that they had offended someone they should not have offended, which led to such a disaster. In addition, after the 3rd princess sent the Black Cavalry to support them, the Soaring Cloud sect did not have such an incident again. Thus, everyone did not take this matter to heart. However, such peaceful days were soon disrupted. Because the same thing had also begun to happen in other sects. And the sects that had such incidents were basically those ranked in the upper echelons of Xiling City. There were a few outstanding geniuses, but they were not considered top-notch sections. For example, an existence like Dragon Teeth Mountain had been safe and sound. Instead, it was those sects that were about the same level as the Soaring Cloud sect that began to encounter accidents one after another. When the number of Daijing Yuan Meridian geniuses who went missing in Xiling City exceeded 5, everyone finally realized that the situation was much more serious than they had imagined. It was obvious that the other party was targeting such people. Although these sects had already strengthened their vigilance and searched everywhere for clues, they still did not find anything. Moreover, often after 1 or 2 people went missing, the other party would change to another sect to target. Their whereabouts were erratic and unpredictable. Just how powerful was this person to be able to do all this without anyone noticing? Just thinking about it sent chills down one's spine. For a time, almost everyone in Xiling City was in danger. No one knew if they would be the next. Especially those young cultivators with Daijing Yuan meridians, they were even more uneasy. Although they had outstanding talent, their current strength was still limited. They had not had the time to grow into a true powerhouse. How could they deal with all this? Although the 3rd princess had sent Mu Qinghe and the others to investigate the matter thoroughly, they had not found the culprit and there was almost no progress. Therefore, even though Shangguan Wan and Jiang Yuqing's wedding was approaching, the sky of Xiling City seemed to be shrouded in a layer of shadow. The Imperial Palace. Jiang Yuqing went straight all the way to Huayang Palace. His face was expressionless and the aura around him was cold and gloomy. Many palace servants felt fear in their hearts and hurriedly saluted. Jiang Yuqing ignored these people and went straight to the main hall. Chani was guarding the door. When she saw Jiang Yuqing arrive, she curtsied. "Greetings, young master." Jiang Yuqing asked coldly. "Where is His Highness now?" Chani said. "His Highness came back to rest after the morning court. He's taking a nap now." Without another word, Jiang Yuqing lifted his foot and was about to go inside. Chani immediately stepped forward and stopped him. Her tone was polite, but her expression was resolute. "Young master, His Highness has been busy with the wedding matters and also has to deal with various matters in the imperial court. He hasn't been able to rest properly. Now that she's finally fallen asleep, why don't you let her rest for a while? If there's anything, how about letting this servant pass on the message?" Jiang Yuqing sneered. "Is she really that tired? How come this young master doesn't know?" Yuan Wei and the people from the Ministry of Rites were handling the various trivial matters of the wedding. At most, she would say a few words and give her opinions. He was also handling the various matters in the imperial court. Shangguan Wan looked busy, but in reality she did nothing. What was there to be tired about? Chani frowned inwardly when she heard Jiang Yuqing's unpleasant tone. There were only a few days left until the wedding. Why did Jiang Yuqing suddenly come to find trouble with His Highness at this time? "Young master, it's really inconvenient for His Highness to see you right now. You should..." "Impudent!" Jiang Yuqing hollered angrily. "You're just a lowly servant, yet you dare to stop me time and time again? Chani, you've been by the 3rd princess's side for a long time, and you're highly regarded. Do you actually think that you're a master now?" Panic flashed across Chani's face and she immediately knelt down. "I don't dare. I'm just helping His Highness, Chani." At this point, Shangguan Wan's voice suddenly sounded from the room. "Let Yuqing in." Chani heaved a sigh of relief in her heart and hurriedly said, "Yes." Then she lowered her head. "I know my mistake. Young master, please." Jiang Yuqing narrowed his eyes, walked past her and pushed the door open. "Chani, go and receive your punishment yourself." "Yes." Chani then stood up, carefully closed the door and knelt down in the courtyard. When the other servants in Huayang Palace saw this scene, they didn't dare to go near and could only discuss it privately. What's wrong with young master? Why is he so angry today? Who knows? But it's definitely not a small matter. When young master came in the past, when did he treat Chani so rudely? On the surface, it looks like he's punishing Chani, but he's actually slapping His Highness's face. That's right. Who doesn't know that Chani is His Highness's most trusted subordinate? There's only a few days left for her to fool around, so why did she suddenly cause such a scene? Shh. Don't say anything else. Be careful of your words. Let's go. Disperse. The servants in Huayang Palace were all smart, and they knew what they could say and what they couldn't. Hence, Jiang Yuqing didn't even care if his previous actions would be spread out. Besides, he really couldn't tolerate it anymore. When he walked into the room, Shang Wanwan was sitting in front of the dressing table. After she came back, she originally planned to take off her mask, but who knew that she would hear Jiang Yuqing coming in? Thus, she could only put on her half-removed mask again. When Jiang Yuqing came in, he just happened to catch a glimpse of the ghastly wound on her cheek. It had already been so long, but the wound on Shang Wanwan's face hadn't improved in the slightest. In some places it even festered from time to time, making it look extremely sinister. Jiang Yuqing couldn't help but frown. After a while, Shang Wanwan finished putting on the mask and turned her head to look at him. Her face was as bright and clean as before, no different from before. However, Jiang Yuqing knew what her true face looked like under that mask, so he actually felt even more awkward looking at it. However, Shang Wanwan didn't seem to notice. She frowned when she saw the anger that hadn't yet faded from Jiang Yuqing's face. She frowned a little and said tiredly, "What do you want to do by coming in so aggressively? Let me say something first. This consort is very tired right now and doesn't have the energy to deal with you. If there's nothing urgent, let's talk about it another day." Jiang Yuqing sneered. "Don't you know best why you're tired?" Shang Wanwan paused. "I already warned you once before to stop before going too far. But what are you planning to do now? Are you crazy? You can get a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 836. Shang Wanwan's expression immediately turned cold. This consort isn't crazy. This consort knows what she's doing. I don't need you to tell me what to do. She looked coldly at Jiang Yuqing. Do you think that just because our wedding is imminent, you have the right to control everything about this consort? Jiang Yuqing, don't forget your status. No matter what, he was just a descendant of an aristocratic family. If it weren't for his engagement with her, how could he have everything he had today? After all, she was going to officially ascend the throne in a few days. When that time came, Jiang Yuqing would be even lower than her. He actually dared to be so arrogant in front of her? Jiang Yuqing was so angry that he laughed. It seemed that Shang Wanwan had really been blinded by the status and power that had yet to come. Military power wasn't in her hands. Even if imperial power was in her hands, she was just a puppet. Besides, her foundation wasn't solid. It was hard to say if she could even hold on to this position. Without him, would she be where she was today? He originally didn't want to argue with her about this. After all, it wasn't the first time he knew that Shang Wanwan was brainless. Back then, he'd chosen her because he saw that she was easy to control. But he didn't expect that she'd become so crazy now. Jiang Yuqing's gaze was cold. Enough people have gone missing in Xiling City. At this critical time, I don't want to hear this kind of news again, understand? However, in the face of Jiang Yuqing's repeated warnings, Shang Wanwan didn't take them to heart at all. She sneered, turned around, and leisurely took off the exquisite dangling ornament on her head. I knew you came for this matter, but there's really no need. It's just that a few disciples have gone missing. Up until now, no one has found any clues. In the future, no one will find out who did it. What are you worried about? She didn't avoid Jiang Yuqing guessing that she was the one who did it. In any case, the two of them had done too many unspeakable things together, and they had each other's weaknesses. Unless Jiang Yuqing wanted to fight to the death, he had to stand on her side. Seeing that Shang Wanwan was so fearless, Jiang Yuqing frowned and the anger in his chest burned even more. In order to recover her strength, Shang Wanwan had indeed gone crazy. She didn't even care about how much of an impact it would have on them if something like this happened at this time. Right now, she only had herself in her mind. Besides, I'm doing this for the sake of both of us. You don't want me to be unable to even pick up the scepter on our wedding day, do you? Shang Wanwan glanced at him. That was the symbol of the Tianling Emperor's status. If she failed in front of all the civil and military officials, then she would be completely finished. Even Jiang Yuqing was the same. He couldn't possibly find a third princess to marry. Jiang Yuqing clenched his teeth. In the end, he could only spit out one sentence. Remember to wipe your mouth clean after eating. With that, he turned and strode away. Shang Wanwan sneered disapprovingly, then turned her head to look at the mirror to do her makeup. In the depths of her eyes, a trace of blood gradually spread. It was cold and sinister, but it disappeared in an instant. After Jiang Yuqing left Huayang Hall, he had nowhere to vent his anger and wanted to directly leave the palace. But when he thought about how His Majesty had yet to wake up, he suppressed his anger and went to Qingfeng Hall. In the end, he happened to see Zhou Mingxi walking out of his room. Jiang Yuqing felt that it was strange. Counting the days, it shouldn't be Zhou Mingxi's turn to be on duty today, right? He walked forward. Official Zhou. Zhou Mingxi looked up and saw that it was Jiang Yuqing. He froze for a moment, then bowed with a smile. Eldest young master. Jiang Yuqing glanced at the tightly shut door and asked, shouldn't officials would be resting at home today? Why did you come to the palace? Why isn't your attendant here? Zhou Mingxi was rarely alone. Zhou Mingxi smiled and cupped his hands. I really shouldn't be here today, but I suddenly found a method in an ancient book the day before yesterday. I wanted to see if it would work on His Majesty, so I came to take a look. I hope eldest young master won't take offense. Jiang Yuqing nodded in understanding. Not at all. Official Zhou is so dedicated to His Majesty, so you should be praised. How can you blame me? Has His Majesty's condition improved? Zhou Mingxi paused. In fact, the poison in His Majesty's body has basically been cleared. It stands to reason that he should wake up in a few days, but what? Hearing that His Majesty might wake up, Jiang Yuqing's eyes suddenly lit up and he hurriedly asked. It's just that His Majesty seemed to have been stimulated by something before and he doesn't seem to want to wake up. That's why there hasn't been any progress until now. If we can invite someone close to His Majesty to come and talk to him, maybe His Majesty can wake up. Jiang Yuqing's mind moved slightly. Then in official Zhu's opinion, who is the most suitable person to invite? Zhou Mingxi looked troubled. The people outside didn't know, but the people in the palace knew clearly. Qingfeng Hall was strictly guarded and no one was allowed to come close. Even the young princes and young masters were not allowed to enter. Let alone the others. In the end, only third Princess Shang Wanwan was the most suitable person. How could Jiang Yuqing not think of this? He slightly restrained his expression. In other words, if the third princess is invited, then His Majesty is very likely to wake up? Zhou Mingxi hurriedly lowered his head. Your wedding with Her Highness is imminent. I'm afraid that at this time, I will talk to her about this matter. Official Zhou, you just need to help His Majesty recuperate. If His Majesty really wakes up, you have contributed greatly. Zhou Mingxi repeatedly thanked him and said, Eldest young master, His Majesty's health has been fluctuating. The third princess has always been suspicious of the people taking care of His Majesty, including those two. So what do you think about this matter? Don't worry, I know what to do. Before His Majesty wakes up, try not to let this matter spread. Jiang Yuqing said indifferently. Zhou Mingxi breathed a sigh of relief. That's good. As long as His Majesty wakes up, we will be at ease. If there's nothing else, this humble subject will take his leave first. Jiang Yuqing nodded and let Zhou Mingxi leave. After he left, Jiang Yuqing personally went into the room to check. Everything was similar to what Zhou Mingxi said. He calculated in his heart for a while and finally returned to Huayang Palace to tell Shang Wanwan about this matter. Shang Wanwan actually didn't take this matter to heart, but she had no choice but to agree perfunctorily after being urged by Jiang Yuqing. In any case, in her opinion, whether Imperial Father woke up or not didn't affect her much. Because no matter what, she would be the one standing at the top. Jiang Yuqing knew what Shang Wanwan was thinking. He wanted to say a few more words, but in the end he gave up. There were some things that didn't need to be told to her. As long as His Majesty wakes up, then the rest of the matter would naturally be solved easily. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI Network. Chapter 837. Undercurrents were surging in Xiling City, but the people in the Chongshu Pavilion did not seem to care at all, because their thoughts were all on Tu Luiwei and the others. When the group returned from the Dahuang swamp, none of the 3 senior brothers and junior sisters came back with them, which made them very worried. Even though Jian Fengqi quickly came over to explain the situation, she still couldn't help herself. But after so long there were still no signs of them coming back. How could they not be worried? If not for the pavilion master staying on the mountain with a calm expression, they would have gone to the Dahuang swamp to look for them. In an inconspicuous room on the mountain, Qi Dai was lying on the bed. Yuqi Song was beside him taking his pulse. The 2 disciples stood at the side and watched. They seemed a little nervous but also a little curious. After a while Yuqi Song nodded and looked at the 2. Not bad. His body has taken a turn for the better. Although his Yuan meridian is mostly destroyed, his life is saved. Thanks to the 2 of you for taking care of him during this time. The 2 hurriedly said, it's all thanks to the pavilion master's prescription. We just did some small things. It's not worth mentioning. Yuqi Song smiled and shook his head. I know his body's condition very well. It was not easy for him to get through it. Thank you for your hard work. As he spoke, he took out 2 wooden boxes and handed them to each of them. These are the prescriptions for refining 6th grade pills. Take them and study them well. Try to refine them as soon as possible. The 2 were shocked and looked at each other. One of them hurriedly said, Pavilion Master, this is too valuable. They had only taken care of Qi Dai for a while and did not do anything big. This reward was too generous. Just take it. Seeing Yuqi Song insist, the 2 could only take it in surprise and joy. The other person could not help but ask, Pavilion Master, is it worth it for you to go through so much trouble to save his life? His mind is not clear anymore. Even if he is saved, I'm afraid he will be seriously injured, unable to speak and confused like a 3-year-old child. Why did the Pavilion Master value him so much? Yuqi Song glanced at Qi Dai. I have my own considerations. This person was very important. Jiang Yuqing had taken the initiative to deliver such a weakness to him. How could he not seize it? The remaining 2 disciples looked at each other, still puzzled. But since the pavilion master said so, it must be useful. After a moment of hesitation, one of them continued to ask, Pavilion Master, little junior sister and the others haven't returned yet. What do you think? Yuqi Song paused and shook his head gently. Don't worry, they will return safely. Red Moon Desert. Under the scorching sun, a figure was running quickly in the boundless golden desert. A fist-sized ball of yellow sand was following closely behind her. Stop chasing! Stop chasing! Mu Hongyu shouted as she ran. In a moment of panic, her body instantly disappeared from the spot. A moment later, he appeared in another place. She hurriedly turned around to take a look, but there was nothing. However, just as she heaved a sigh of relief, she saw that not far away, a mass of yellow sand quickly condensed and pounced on her again. Puff! That lump of yellow sand directly hit her face. In an instant, Mu Hongyu's head and face were covered in sand. Dazed, she stood rooted to the ground. After a moment of daze, she started to scratch her head crazily and screamed hysterically, Ah! Is there an end to this? Ever since I entered this Red Moon Desert for no reason, I was separated from the others. Then this lump of yellow sand kept following me. At first, I didn't realize that something was amiss. After being attacked a few times and landing in a pathetic state, I then realized that this thing was targeting me. Just like what Qin Yi said previously, it was difficult for cultivators to walk in this desert. Every step consumed a lot of energy. Mu Hongyu relied on her faint yuan body and originally thought that it would be easier for her. In the end, she was pestered by this thing and started to run on a long road. During this period of time, no matter where she ran, she would always be greeted by a lump of yellow sand. Speaking of injuries, they weren't very serious. However, which girl could endure being covered in dust all day long? Mu Hongyu felt that she was going crazy. I beg you, don't follow me anymore, all. I really don't know how I offended you. I really can't take it anymore. She was exhausted and the force in her body was almost depleted. She really couldn't take it anymore. Then she directly lay down on the ground. Ow! The moment she touched the ground, she was so scalded that she straightened up like a carp. It's too hot. I actually forgot that this is the Red Moon Desert. Just as she was feeling miserable, she saw another lump of yellow sand gathering in front of her. The key was that it was twice as big as the previous one. Mu Hongyu cursed under her breath and resigned to her fate as she turned around and ran. That's right. If a faint yuan body can't even travel 50 kilometers, how can it be called a faint yuan body? In the dark, Diwu Zhangzi, who was controlling everything, couldn't help but mutter. According to the rumors, a person with a faint yuan body can travel thousands of kilometers in an instant. What does this count as? The others don't seem so noisy. Diwu Zhangzi looked at the other situation. Needless to say, Qin Yi and Lei Laoxi's cultivation levels were much higher, and they could take a beating very well. As for that round-faced lady, her face was also flushed red as she crazily refined pills. As for that golden-haired young man, tisk, he can really endure it. With such a cold and evil aura in his body, it's really enviable when he cultivates. Even someone as picky as Diwu Zhangzi couldn't help but praise him. I wonder how Yu is now. Big Bao is training her personally. Thinking about Dugu Maobao's methods, Diwu Zhangzi's eyelids twitched harshly. These few people added together probably can't even compare to that girl's suffering. Dugu Maobao might dote on her, but he's really inhumane when it comes to training her. Achoo! In the center of the Red Moon Desert beside the Sapphire Lake, Chu Luiyue suddenly sneezed. She rubbed her nose. I wonder who's talking about me? However, I don't have the time and energy to think about this now. Faster! Faster! Dugu Maobao's cold voice sounded. Chu Luiyue changed her palm into a fist and punched forward again. A figure flashed in front of her. The other party dodged again. At the same time, a leg kicked towards Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue clenched her teeth and turned her waist, narrowly avoiding the attack. However, one of her calves was still scraped a little and instantly she felt a burning pain. She lowered her body and immediately squatted down, pouncing towards the other party like a fox. The other party grabbed her neck with one hand. Chu Luiyue tilted her head to avoid it, then immediately clamped down on the other party's wrist with one hand and attacked. Bang! The two of them fell heavily on the ground. Lan Xiao came back after wandering around and was surprised by this scene. Big Bao, you don't seem to be using the peak of the 6th stage puppet from before? Dugu Maobao said coldly, this is the peak of the 7th stage. Digression. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. Chapter 838. Lan Zhao's mouth twitched. Peak of rank 7? She just broke through to rank 6 not long ago and you're already so ruthless? Isn't it inappropriate? Lan Zhao's heart ached when he saw how badly injured she was. I only have one rank 6 puppet and it was destroyed by her, so I can only change it to this. Dugu Maobao said without a change in his expression and heartbeat. Lan Xiao choked and was speechless. These puppets were refined by this fellow himself and he could have any rank he wanted. What's there to say? It's just an excuse. Lan Xiao couldn't help but lament. It's rare to see you so shameless when she's around. How nostalgic. If you have nothing to do, I can help you find some entertainment. Dugu Maobao's voice was filled with murderous intent. Cough, I still have things to do, so I'll leave first. I'll leave her to you. Lan Xiao disappeared quickly after he finished speaking, as if he was afraid that Dugu Maobao would do something. What a joke. It was fine if he tortured you or alone, but he did it to raise her strength. Dugu Maobao knew what he was doing. But if it was him, Dugu Maobao would probably torture him to death. His body was extremely delicate, especially his face. He couldn't be hit. Lan Xiao left decisively and Dugu Maobao was the only one left. His attention was naturally all on Chu Luiyue. When she broke through to become a stage 6 warrior, Chu Luiyue triggered the heaven and earth phenomenon which surprised Dugu Maobao. Originally, after knowing that she had changed her body and had a Daijing Yuan meridian, he had already planned to train her according to the standard of a normal Daijing Yuan meridian cultivator. He didn't expect her to be so much more outstanding than they expected. Dugu Maobao had always had high hopes for her, so he simply gave up on his previous plan. He clenched his teeth and followed the previous training intensity. He first threw out a peak rank 6 puppet to test the waters and was shocked to find that her adaptability seemed to be stronger than before. Thus, when the lass was able to fight to a draw with the puppet at the peak of the 6th step, She immediately switched to the puppet at the peak of the 7th step. In fact, she didn't let him down. She grew rapidly in every battle. At first, she didn't even have the strength to fight back against this peak rank 7 puppet and could only be suppressed. But now she could try her best to avoid the attacks and counterattack from time to time. Although her cultivation level wasn't high, her strength had already far exceeded what she appeared to be on the surface. At this point, Chu Liyue's entire focus was on the puppet in front of her. The longer the two of them fought, the more intense the fight became and the more injuries she suffered. At this moment there was not a single part of her body. But for some reason the battle intent in her heart was getting stronger and stronger. Gradually Yue's dugu emotions. Sometimes, even she herself didn't know how she was able to execute her moves. It was like an instinct. She gradually realized. Inside her body there was another her, who had been sleeping. And now that her was slowly awakening. Swish. The puppet bent its arm and used its elbow to hit Chu Liyue's chest. Chu Liyue's body shook and a sweet taste of blood gushed into her mouth. Her gaze turned cold. Instead of retreating, she moved forward. At the same time, she clamped the puppet's arm and threw it forward. Bang! The puppet was fiercely thrown to the ground. Chu Liyue took advantage of the situation and directly stomped her foot on his back. Crack! A crisp sound was heard. Chu Liyue stomped a dent into the puppet's steel body. Chu Liyue spat out a mouthful of blood and roughly wiped the blood off her lips. She looked at the blue lake. She was in a daze for a moment. She vaguely heard her own voice. Debao, come again. Chu Liyue's speed of improvement was faster than Dugu Maobao had expected. Her body seemed to contain endless potential. The stronger the opponent, the stronger the potential. As long as she was given a certain amount of stimulation, she could quickly stimulate the energy in her body and become even stronger. Could this be related to the strange Yuan meridian in her body? Dugu Maobao thought to himself. Swish. The puppet under her feet disappeared. Another identical puppet appeared in front of her. This one is the same as the previous one. This time, as long as you can settle it within 15 minutes, you'll pass. If someone else was here, they would be so shocked that their jaws would drop to the ground. Chu Liyue, a beginner stage 6 stage, had to fight with a peak 7th stage. Not only did she have to win, she had to set a time limit of 15 minutes. That was simply crazy. However, Chu Liyue seemed to be used to it. She lightly nodded and agreed. These puppets were all meticulously refined. They were powerful and precise. Her advantage was that she could use her force to fight against her opponent. After all, puppets only had physical strength. However, there was one thing that she could not compare to the puppets. They did not know pain or fatigue. Chu Liyue had fought with them for so long. If not for the abundant force in her body, she would not have been able to hold on. Now it was not easy for her to shorten the time to 15 minutes. If I can do it this time, can I make a request? Chu Liyue suddenly asked. What do you want? Dugu Maobao asked. Chu Liyue took a deep breath and said, I want to go back to Xiling first. Calculating the time, it was almost the 6th of June. She did not want to miss the wedding day of Shengguan Wan and Jiang Yuqing. Dugu Maobao agreed readily when he heard that. No problem. That was her territory. There was no problem if she wanted to go back. Chu Liyue was relieved. She looked at the puppet in front of her and a cold light flashed across her eyes. Then she attacked first. Chu Liyue and the rest were in different parts of the Red Moon Desert. They were all training hard. There was only one person who could be considered to be relaxed. Rongxiu. He did not need to ask to know that Dugu Maobao and the rest must have brought Chu Liyue to the center of the Red Moon Desert. There was only one lake in the desert and it was also their biggest stronghold. Of course, it was her favorite place to stay in the past. He walked forward wanting to go in that direction. However, Lan Xiao and the rest were not willing to let him go. They tried to stop him. Luckily, Rongxiu's strength had increased greatly, and it was not difficult for him to deal with these. When he broke through Lan Xiao's checkpoint again, he finally succeeded in angering Lan Xiao. I'm not playing anymore. Anyway, is going back to Xiling. There's no point in doing this anymore. She will definitely be busy with the Tianling dynasty when she goes back. I really don't know what's the point of being the empress. You should have told her to come with us. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows and said, Oh right, there's something I forgot to tell you seniors. Is no longer the empress. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 839. What did you say? Lan Zhao's voice was filled with shock. How can she not be the empress? Rong Xiu's expression didn't change and his voice was clear. If you don't believe me, you can ask her yourself. Or you can ask anyone from the Tianling dynasty. Hearing that Rong Xiu didn't sound like he was joking, Lan Zhao also realized that something was amiss. There was no need to lie about this. Since Rong Xiu said this, it must be true. They were only happy that Yulan had returned and didn't ask her that much. What's going on? Is it because she doesn't have a Tianjing Yuan meridian? Back then she was indeed given the title of empress because of this. However, it didn't seem appropriate to remove her title just because of this, right? The Tianling dynasty must have accumulated 1,000 years of luck to have a genius like her. If they had a brain, they wouldn't do such a thing. Rong Xiu lowered his eyes and hid the murderous intent in them. His thick eyelashes cast a faint shadow under his eyelids, making the aura around him seem much colder. Because her Shangguan Yu identity is already dead. Big Bao. Big Bao. Dugu Maobao was watching Chu Luiyue fight with the puppet when he heard Lan Zhao's anxious voice. He frowned. What's wrong? Lan Zhao had always placed great importance on his image, including his voice. If nothing major happened, he definitely wouldn't sound like this. Nervous and angry. Dugu Maobao's heart skipped a beat. Lan Zhao hurried back with an extremely ugly expression on his face. Even when Yulan didn't come back for a few years, he didn't show such an expression. Lan Zhao closed his eyes and forced himself to calm down. Where's Fifth? Ask him to come back. Dugu Maobao didn't understand and frowned. What's wrong? What happened? Lan Zhao didn't answer directly and only urged. Ask him to come back first. I have something to say. Dugu Maobao could only call Diwu Zhangzi back. What are you doing? I'm teaching those kids well. Diwu Zhangzi was speaking when he saw the strange expressions on the two's faces, and his voice came to an abrupt halt. What was going on? The three of them had known each other for many years and understood each other very well. The current atmosphere was simply too rare. Something must have happened. Especially Lan Zhao, his face seemed to be covered in a layer of ice. This expression was normal on De Bao's face, but on him it was too strange. Dugu Maobao said, now that everyone is here, can you tell me what's going on? Lan Zhao raised his chin and spoke to Diwu Zhangzi. Look after De Bao first. The two of them looked at each other blankly. What is going on? Do you know why Yu'er changed her body? The two of them frowned. They had always thought that it had something to do with her memory loss, so they had never asked. Lan Zhao took a deep breath and said word by word, this is because Yu'er died of sexual intercourse. Those bastards from the Tianling dynasty seized power and took advantage of Yu'er's amnesia to force her into a dead end. And now she is indeed not Shangguan Yu but Chu Luiyue. Previously, when she called herself Chu Luiyue, they didn't take it seriously and thought that she was just being cautious and didn't reveal her real name. Who knew that this was the situation? This news was simply too shocking, and Dugu Maobao and Diwu Zhangzi couldn't react for a moment. What are you talking about? Yu'er is exceptionally smart and powerful. In the Tianling dynasty she is almost above everyone else. How could it be? Although the Dahuang swamp they were in was also part of the Tianling dynasty's territory, they had never taken the Tianling dynasty seriously. Because of this, they didn't pay much attention to the situation over there and knew nothing about these things. Moreover, in their eyes only Yu'er could bully others. How could anyone frame her to death? Dugu Maobao suddenly asked, say it again. Say it again. Who are the ones who harmed her? His face was expressionless and his tone was very calm. But Diwu Zhangzi and Lan Zhao felt a chill in their hearts. He was simply too scary like this. Big Bao, calm down first. Lan Zhao advised. I'm very calm. Dugu Maobao interrupted him. I'll ask you again. Who are the ones? Healing. There were only 4 days left until Shangguan Wan and Jiang Yuqing's wedding. This day was also the day that Xiahou Yushu would go to the Jiang residence to deliver the betrothal gifts. Originally, they didn't intend to do it so early. After all, no one wanted to clash with Shangguan Wan and Jiang Yuqing's big day. But the Jiang residents took the initiative to ask them to deliver the betrothal gifts first. After the two's wedding was over, they would then work on Xiahou Yushu and Jiang Yuji's wedding. The Xiahou residents did as they were told. Xiahou Rong also came along. Logically speaking, he didn't need to come along. But he knew that Jiang Yuqing wanted the 9 clouds yuan recovery pill, so he could only bring it over personally. This way, on the one hand it was for safety, and on the other hand, it could show the importance that the Xiahou residents placed on this marriage. Loads of betrothal gifts were sent to the Jiang residents. In the front hall, the two families were sitting together and chatting happily. After chatting for a while, Xiahou Rong mentioned that he had some matters to discuss with Jiang Yuqing in private. Everyone thought that the two of them were going to discuss matters of the imperial court, so they let them go to the study. After entering the room, Xiahou Rong took out the black wooden box and handed it over. "It's here. I hope eldest young master can abide by the previous agreement." Jiang Yuqing's lips curved up into a smile as he reached out to take the item. Of course. Suddenly his expression changed. "This thing has been touched by someone." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 840. Xiahou Rong was stunned. "What?" He hastily glanced at the wooden box made of black gas, frowned and firmly denied. "This is impossible. I have been keeping this thing carefully and no one has touched it." Jiang Yuqing's expression was cold and his aura was chilling. "It's obvious that the seal has been tampered with. I gave this thing to you personally. Don't you think I know what it was like at that time?" Xiahou Rong choked. "What about the key?" Jiang Yuqing stretched out his hand. Xiahou Rong was also very unconvinced, so he threw the key over. His face didn't look good. "Young master, since I promised to return this thing to you, I will never break my promise. If you want to see it, just go ahead." At that time, Jiang Yuqing personally promised to give this 9 clouds yuan recovery pill to him as a reward. But now, before he could use it, it was taken back. Xiahou Rong was quite dissatisfied with Jiang Yuqing for a long time. So he spoke very rudely at this time. Jiang Yuqing took the key, ignored him, and opened the black wooden box. The wooden box opened. It was empty. Jiang Yuqing's face darkened in an instant. He sneered and looked at Xiahou Rong. "Lord Xiahou, what do you say?" Xiahou Rong widened his eyes in shock, staring at the empty wooden box. "How is it possible? How is this possible? I've been keeping it well. How can it be gone?" Jiang Yuqing threw the black wooden box in front of Xiahou Rong, and it fell on the ground with a muffled sound. "Whether it's true or not, see for yourself." Xiahou Rong couldn't care less. He directly picked up the black wooden box on the ground and looked at it carefully. When he looked around and confirmed that there was indeed nothing inside, his face turned white with a schwa sound. Fine beads of sweat quickly seeped out of his forehead, and his lips trembled slightly. The black wooden box in his hand instantly became a hot potato. Xiahou Rong didn't know whether to take it or throw it away. The expression on his face kept changing, which was wonderful. Jiang Yuqing stared at him coldly, his eyes cold. After a while, Xiahou Rong seemed to have finally reacted and hurriedly raised his head. "I don't know. I really don't know. Ever since he obtained this item, he had been carefully keeping it. How could it suddenly disappear?" The corners of Jiang Yuqing's mouth twitched without a smile. "So you're saying that the thing inside ran away on its own?" Xiahou Rong began to recall quickly as countless images flashed through his mind. No. Today he had personally gone to the study to retrieve this item. There was nothing unusual about the whole process. There was no trace of it being touched at all. In other words, the other party must have taken it away without anyone noticing. Can do that. Wait a minute. Xiahou Rong's face suddenly changed. The number of people who were so clear about everything could be counted on one hand. Especially if you know how to find it and take it away. "It seems that Lord Xiahou already knows who did it," said Jiang Yuqing calmly, his gaze filled with mockery. Xiahou Rong's lips moved and he muttered in disbelief, "Impossible. Impossible. Impossible. I've always trusted Lord Xiahou's character. This time I'll take it that you didn't guard it well. As long as you can find the person within a day and bring the 9 clouds yuan recovery pill back in one piece, this matter will come to an end. I'll treat it as if it never happened. How about that?" Jiang Yuqing looked down, twirled the thumb ring in his hand and slowly said, "As for the person who did this, I'll have to trouble you to deal with him as well, Lord Xiahou. After all, the fewer people who know about this, the better. I'm doing this for your reputation. Don't you think so? He felt that he was already very benevolent by dealing with it this way. But to Xiahou Rong, this was undoubtedly an extremely difficult matter. This was because the person who did it was highly likely to be his second son, Xiahou Tingon. Xiahou Rong kept quiet for a while before swallowing his saliva with much difficulty. If you find that person, can you spare his life, eldest young master? Jiang Yuqing looked up slightly and glanced at him nonchalantly. Looking at Xiahou Rong's nervous face, he suddenly laughed. Seems like I guessed correctly. It was indeed Xiahou Tingon who did it. I didn't expect him to be so daring to do such a thing. Xiahou Rong's hands trembled. This matter hasn't come to a conclusion yet. Perhaps it's someone else, but you also know that he was chased out of the house by me some time ago. I'm afraid that his injuries haven't fully recovered yet. How could? His voice became softer and softer. To be honest, even he didn't believe it himself. To be able to successfully sneak into the Xiahou residence, pass through the barrier outside the study without a sound, enter, find the key, open the wooden box and take the item away. Other than Xiahou Rong himself, only Xiahou Tingon can break through these layers of defense. Jiang Yuqing looked at Xiahou Rong as if he was looking at a joke. What a pitiful parent's heart. Lord Xiahou is pleading for him here and wants to protect him no matter what, but it's a pity that he doesn't care about you, his father. If he had any concerns about you and the entire Xiahou residence, he definitely wouldn't do such a thing. Jiang Yuqing's words were like a knife that pierced into Xiahou Rong's heart. He closed his eyes, suppressed his emotions and cupped his hands. Eldest young master, don't worry. I'll definitely return the item perfectly. If it's really that unfilial son who did it, I hope that eldest young master can let him off this time on my account. Xiahou Rong had almost never begged anyone with such a humble tone. Even when he wanted to get the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill back then, he had a lot of discussions with Jiang Yuqing. This was the first time he begged like this. Jiang Yuqing paused for a long time before finally nodding. Okay. After Xiahou Rong went out, he quickly left with Xiahou Yushu and the rest. Other than him and Jiang Yuqing, nobody knew what the two of them were talking about in the study. Almost everyone thought that everything related to the marriage was going smoothly, and they just had to wait for the wedding to be over. Then the two aristocratic families could join forces. After returning to the residence, Xiahou Rong immediately ordered his men to bring Xiahou Tingon back. Everyone in the Xiahou residence was very shocked. They just fought for him not long ago, so why did they have to bring him back? But he's my biological son after all, and he's the one I doted on the most for so many years. It's normal that I can't bear to let him go. Very quickly, they sent back news that Xiahou Tingon had been staying with the lady from Chunfeng restaurant. When Xiahou Rong heard this, he was furious and immediately went over personally. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 841. When Xiahou Rong came, it was evening and Xiahou Tingon was eating with Xiao Dai. As if it was because she came from Chunfeng restaurant, Xiao Dai wasn't good at cooking, and the food she cooked was hard to swallow. Xiahou Tingon was born a rich young master, so everything he ate and used was the best. How could he be used to such food? At the start he could still bring Xiao Dai to restaurants outside, but as time passed he didn't have much money on him. One had to know that when he left the Xiahou residence, he had very backbone and left without a single cent. The wealth in the cosmic ring that he gave Xiao Dai was all used to redeem Xiao Dai, so he didn't have much left. The two of them had been living a simple life for quite a few days. Xiahou Tingon originally felt uncomfortable, and with the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill being stolen, he had been very uneasy and fearful during this period of time. He had no energy in the day and couldn't sleep at night. Even if he occasionally fell asleep, he would have nightmares. After a period of torment, he had lost a lot of weight. Xiahou Tingon started to regret it. Even though this residence was clean and tidy, it couldn't be compared to the Xiahou residence. There was also no one to serve him. He was used to living a life of luxury. Experiencing the life of an ordinary person was even more unbearable than killing him. Actually, Xiahou Tingon had thought of going back to admit his mistake. But on the one hand, he couldn't bring himself to do so as he was afraid of being mocked by others. On the other hand, he was also worried that the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill would be exposed. Rather than that, he might as well live like this. However, this tranquility was quickly broken. Bang! The sound of the door being kicked was heard, and Xiahou Tingon and Xiao Dai were both shocked. The two of them looked at each other and heard Xiahou Rong's angry voice from outside. Unfilial son. Come out now. Xiahou Tingon's heart skipped a beat. They must have found out that I lost the 9 clouds yuan recovery pill. He instantly stood up in a panic and instinctively wanted to escape. Xiao Dai looked at him in confusion. Second young master, is the person outside Lord Xiahou? He seems to be here to find you. Just say that I'm not here. Xiahou Tingon hurriedly said and wanted to jump out of the window. But before he could move, his waist was entangled by a rope. Xiahou Rong pulled hard. Xiahou Tingon instantly fell backward. Bang! He fell heavily in front of Xiahou Rong. Second young master. Seeing this scene, Xiao Dai shouted in a panic. She clutched the door tightly with both hands, looking very worried. Xiahou Rong glanced at her coldly. This young lady looked to be about 15 or 16 years old. She had a small face without any makeup and was delicate and pretty. She looked especially pitiful when she cried. She was indeed very different from Jiang Yuji's arrogant and overbearing appearance. No wonder this unfilial son would do such a thing. Scram! Xiahou Rong bellowed. From now on, don't let me see you in the West Hill. Xiao Dai's body shuddered, and tears streamed down her face as she looked at Xiahou Tingon with reluctance. I can leave, but please don't hurt second young master. It's all my fault. Xiahou Rong frowned and his aura became colder. Fear flashed across Xiao Dai's face as she hurriedly said goodbye to Xiahou Tingon and ran away crying. Only the father-son duo was left in the yard. Xiahou Rong directly dragged him into the room and looked down at him with a dignified expression. Father. Xiahou Tingon was slightly more awake at this point. Seeing this scene, he vaguely guessed something and shouted guiltily. Don't call me. Xiahou Rong rudely interrupted him. Speak. Where's the 9 clouds yuan recovery pill? Xiahou Tingon hurriedly said. Father, I don't know. I really don't know. A loud slap sounded. Xiahou Rong harshly slapped Xiahou Tingon, causing him to fall to the ground. Speak. Xiahou Tingon coughed and spat out a mouthful of blood. Even 2 of his teeth were knocked out. This showed how harsh Xiahou Rong was. I really don't know. Xiahou Tingon was also filled with grievances. Apart from you, who else could steal something without anyone noticing? Xiahou Rong gritted his teeth. Did you find someone to help you? Now that he thought about it, the item might have been lost on the night someone eavesdropped on him. The person who ran away might have purposely gone to lure the tiger away from the mountain to make it easier for this unfilial son to take action. Xiahou Tingon knew that the matter had been exposed and he couldn't deny it. But that item really isn't with me. Father. Listen to my explanation. I did want to steal the 9 clouds yuan recovery pill that day, but someone snatched it away the moment I opened it. Until now I still don't know where it is. Xiahou Tingon hurriedly recounted what happened that day. If it's really in my hands, why aren't you using it now? Father, I'm speaking the truth. After hearing Xiahou Tingon's explanation, Xiahou Rong's heart gradually turned cold. If everything he said was true, then someone purposely followed him into the study that day and took the chance to steal the item. The most terrifying thing was that Xiahou Tingon didn't see what the other party looked like. He didn't have a single clue. If he wanted to find the person, wouldn't it be like finding a needle in a haystack? What Jiang Yuqing wanted was to send the item back perfectly within a day. Xiahou Rong's vision turned black and he almost fell to the ground. Father. Upon seeing this, Xiahou Tingon hurriedly went to help him up, but he was pushed away. Unfilial son. Do you know how big of a trouble you've caused this time? If Jiang Yuqing finds out that the 9 clouds yuan recovery pill is missing, our family won't be able to bear the consequences. Not to mention that I want to protect Xiahou Tingon, but if this matter gets out, I won't even be able to protect myself. The 9 clouds yuan recovery pill is the Tianling royal family's heirloom. If it lands in anyone's hands, it will become a huge hidden danger. The other party has obviously been eyeing us for a long time. They definitely want to make use of this 9 clouds yuan recovery pill. Suddenly, a white light flashed across Xiahou Rong's mind. Who in this world would be so stubborn about this item? To the point of spending so much effort to snatch it? You have to know that I took it from the princess 2 years ago. A ridiculous thought surfaced in his mind and Xiahou Rong couldn't help but tremble. Upon seeing his reaction at the side, Xiahou Tingan's heart also hung up. It seems like this matter is even more serious than I thought. But at this point Xiahou Tingan still thought that he was worried about Jiang Yuqing. Thus his eyes turned and he had some thoughts. He inched closer, lowered his voice and said, "Father, don't worry. Aren't you just worried about Jiang Yuqing? Actually, you don't have to think so much. Jiang Yuqing was also involved in the princess's incident back then, so he definitely can't escape. With this, he really won't dare to do anything to you." Xiahou Rong suddenly looked at him in shock and anger. "What else do you know?" Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 842. Xiahou Tingan was shocked by his reaction and instinctively stepped back, but his collar had already been grabbed tightly. "Speak. You heard everything that day, didn't you?" asked Xiahou Rong harshly. "Father." Cough cough. Xiahou Tingan grabbed his hand and wanted to pry it away, but he started coughing uncomfortably. "I just heard a little." Cough cough. However, Xiahou Rong didn't believe him. His face was unprecedentedly dark. Xiahou Tingan had never seen him with such an expression, and he couldn't help but swallow his remaining words. After a while Xiahou Rong released his hand and stood up. "Come with me to the Jiang mansion. When you reach there you just have to tell Jiang Yuqing what I said previously, but you can't let him know what you heard. Do you understand?" Xiahou Tingan nodded nervously. Xiahou Rong looked at him with deep eyes and sighed in his heart. It's obvious that there are still people in Xiling City who want to find out the truth behind the princess's death back then. These people might be in the imperial court or they might be in the marketplace. Also, there was something that he couldn't help but worry about. Those people might have already returned. Red Moon Desert. After several attempts, Chu Luiyue finally managed to push the puppet in front of her to the ground within 15 minutes. Her body was almost covered in wounds, and there was even a trace of blood at the side of her lips. She looked very disheveled. After training here for a month she felt that she had died a few times. Every time she felt that she could no longer continue, she would rely on the stubbornness at the bottom of her heart to forcefully endure it. However, her efforts weren't wasted. Other than her physical strength becoming stronger and her movement skills increasing, she had unexpectedly broken through to the intermediate stage 6 when she fought with this puppet. Previously she had stayed in the heaven-wrecking Holy Seed's divine domain for a year and had accumulated a lot of origin power. In addition, during this period of time she had been crazily fighting with these puppets. Her combat strength had constantly soared, so it was normal for her to advance. "Big baby. I won," said Chu Luiyue happily as she heaved a heavy sigh. Beside her, the peak 7th order puppet had already been beaten to a pulp. However, no one responded to his words. The surroundings were quiet. Chu Luiyue stared blankly for a moment before taking a few steps closer to the lake. "Debao." Only then did he hear Debao's voice. "We all saw it. You did very well." After being here for a long time, Chu Luiyue became more familiar with them. For some reason, Debao's tone sounded a little off. She blinked and asked tentatively, "Debao, why do you look so unhappy?" Actually, it couldn't be said that he was unhappy. Instead, it was more like he was suppressing some kind of anger. Although he seemed very calm when he spoke, for some reason Chu Luiyue had this feeling. Could it be that someone had provoked him? "It's just a small matter. It doesn't matter." Debao briefly skimmed over it and changed the topic. "You said before that you wanted to go back to West Hill after winning, right?" Chu Luiyue nodded. Calculating the time, it should be too late to go back now. "I'll send you back," Debao said calmly. Chu Luiyue was happy at first, but then she sensed that something was wrong. She frowned. "Debao, are you really okay?" Debao didn't answer. The yellow sand under Chu Luiyue's feet suddenly began to flow. The next moment the scene in front of her changed. She composed herself and looked around. Only then did she realize that Debao had sent her directly back to the intersection of the 3 realms. Then she saw a figure rushing over from the direction of the Red Moon Desert. Although he said that he had rushed over, he was actually sent out directly. "Ouch, my waist." Mu Hongyu held her waist and grimaced in pain. However, halfway through her sentence she saw Chu Luiyue in front of her. "Lu Yu!" she immediately exclaimed. Then she ran directly towards Chu Luiyue. "Oh, it's really you. Great." She originally wanted to rush over and hug Chu Liyue, but when she reached Chu Liyue, she remembered that she was covered in dirt and stopped herself. Chu Liyue supported her arm. Mu Hongyu widened her eyes and saw that Chu Liyue seemed to be injured. She was about to speak with heartache when she realized that the pressure on her body seemed to be heavier than before. Seemed to be much stronger. Lu Yu, have you broken through to the intermediate 6th stage? Mu Hongyu was overjoyed. After seeing Chu Liyue nod with a smile, she immediately circled her several times in amazement. You're amazing. How long has it been and you've risen 2 levels in a row? Let me tell you, bang. A voice suddenly fell beside the two of them. It was Yi Ranran. Ouch. She was still holding the medicine cauldron tightly as if she was afraid that it would be broken. Chu Liyue glanced out of the corner of her eye and saw that the medicine cauldron was filled to the brim with elixirs. At a glance there were all kinds of elixirs and their levels were not low. Chu Liyue's eyelids twitched. Ranran. Mu Hongyu hurriedly helped her up. Yi Ranran was still in a daze. When she saw their faces she was pleasantly surprised. Her round little face had lost a lot of weight and her eyes were red. I finally found you. She didn't know why, but people kept forcing her to refine elixirs and there were all kinds of rare herbs. She was exhausted but she couldn't bear to stop. In the end she was so tired. Then Chong Wanzhou, Qi Nilei and Old Four appeared one after another. Chu Liyue sharply realized that although they seemed to have gone through a lot of torture, everyone's strength was much stronger than before. It should be because of Debao and the others, right? Chu Liyue's heart warmed slightly. Let's talk when we get back. Let's go back to Xiling first. They didn't have any objections. Qini said, since we're also going back to Xiling, let's go together. Chu Liyue glanced at him and nodded lightly. Thus, they decided to go back together just like that. Mu Hongyu said, I remember that we still have to go through a few transportation arrays when we get back. Before he could finish his words, a blue barrier enveloped them all. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. This should be Debao's doing. At this moment, Debao's voice rang in her ears. Go back and do what you want to do. Even though his voice was as tender as a baby's, it sounded calm and steady to Chu Liyue's ears, and it was filled with a calming power. Chu Liyue's heart seemed to have an additional layer of confidence. She bowed in the direction of the Red Moon Desert and said seriously, Thank you, seniors. Then the blue barrier flickered. Their figures instantly disappeared from where they were. Feeling. The streets were decorated with lanterns and colored banners, and there was a hubbub of voices. Because the third princess's wedding was in 3 days, it was also the day she ascended the throne. Thus, the entire Xiling celebration lasted for 10 days, from 3 days before the wedding to 7 days after the wedding. At the Jiang residence, the lanterns were lit. Hearing the bustling sounds outside, Jiang Yuqing's heart skipped a beat. Let's go out for a walk. Digression. At 6 p.m. mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from AI Network. Chapter 843. The entire Jiang residence had already been decorated and looked very jubilant. Jiang Yuqing walked to the door and stood with his hands behind his back. Even if he didn't have any expectations for this wedding, his heart still seemed to be touched by something when he saw this scene. The same scene had appeared here 2 years ago. For a moment he almost thought that he had returned to that time. Eldest young master. Sun Qi walked forward and looked at him inquiringly. Do you have any orders? Jiang Yuqing came back to his senses and shook his head. Just walk around, no need to follow me. Yes. Sun Qi hurriedly responded. Jiang Yuqing walked forward. However, he had only taken 2 steps when he heard whispers coming from the side. Hey, how much do you think eldest young master will give this time? Will it be the same as last time? At that time, the lowest-ranking servant in our residence was given 100 white crystal coins, and the higher-ranking servants were even given 1,000 red envelopes. That's impossible. After all, that was his wedding with the Empress. Although the third princess has a noble status now, she's still a little lacking compared to the Empress. I think it's good enough to get 2/3. Hey, you guys are really optimistic. I don't think it's that good. Can't you see that our eldest young master's reaction this time is completely different from last time? The wedding is in 3 days, but I haven't seen eldest young master smile in this period of time. I'm guessing that this year he probably didn't even smile by half. Pa pa pa. Don't say such depressing words. Eldest young master and the third princess wedding is a joyous occasion. You haven't even seen eldest young master once in a few days. How do you know that he hasn't smiled? If you guys don't know this, right? That day, Lord Yuan Wei from the Ministry of Rites brought people over to discuss the wedding with eldest young master. In the end, eldest young master directly let Lord Yuan take care of it himself. I remember that eldest young master even personally chose the tea set for the wedding last time. Although they lowered their voices for a powerhouse like Jiang Yuqing, he could definitely hear it clearly. Sun Qi also heard it. He cursed in his heart and hurriedly went forward. Eldest young master, do you want this subordinate to teach those people a lesson? No need. Jiang Yuqing frowned. No one knew what he was thinking. After a moment he said, just give half of the rewards last time. Sun Qi quickly bowed. Yes. Jiang Yuqing didn't stay any longer. After saying this he walked out. Sun Qi was dazed as he looked at Jiang Yuqing's back view and was momentarily confused. According to eldest young master's temperament, if he heard such words on a normal day, he would not let them off easily. Even Sun Qi didn't dare to casually mention this in front of Jiang Yuqing. He thought for a while but couldn't come up with anything, so he gave up. And after Jiang Yuqing walked out, he casually found a secluded corner and changed into a mask. When he walked out, he became another ordinary-looking young master. The streets were very lively. Although many sects were still shrouded in the shadow of their disciples' disappearance, for most people in Xiling City, this matter had nothing to do with them. The third princess wedding gave them a lot of benefits. They couldn't be more happy. Why would they care about anything else? Jiang Yuqing walked alone on the street. At this moment no one recognized his identity. They all treated him as an ordinary person. They didn't even look at him. Jiang Yuqing walked aimlessly. The scene in front of him was so similar to 2 years ago. However, his mood was completely different. He remembered the discussion of the servants just now and laughed at himself. It was indeed different. At that time he did his best to prepare everything and wanted everything to be perfect. But now he didn't have the energy. Even listening to a few more words made him feel tired. If it weren't for those people reminding him, he would have even forgotten about the reward. But in fact, this was originally because he was happy in his heart that he took the initiative to do so. If it weren't for the fact that he was worried about Shangguanwan's face, he really wouldn't have bothered to do this. The people around him were all happy and lively. Only he was like an outsider who didn't fit in. Even if he was the one who was really going to get married, he didn't feel much until now. Jiang Yuqing walked to a restaurant, casually went up to the second floor and ordered some wine for himself. The wine was refreshing and burning as it went down his throat. What lingered in his mind was everything related to that person. Jiang Yuqing was a little irritated. He wanted to get rid of all these, so he drank one cup after another. However, the more he drank, the hotter the wine became, and the more he drank, the more sober he became. Scenes played out in his mind, becoming more and more vivid. Her laughter, her crying. Her joy, her grief. He thought that as long as he did what he should do and became the best among these people, he would be her best choice. But he didn't expect that everything was just his wishful thinking. In the end, he found out that the person he thought was always high and mighty and that he could only look up to turned out to have eyes full of starlight because of someone. After that, everything that happened to her had nothing to do with him. Even the wedding that he had prepared with all his heart was nothing more than a dream. She was smiling and her eyes were bright and clean. But soon she was engulfed by a ball of fire. In the end, only that pair of determined eyes were left. Jiang Yuqing suddenly woke up. He suddenly stood up. The chair fell to the ground with a muffled sound because of his violent movements. He shook his head fiercely and realized that he seemed to have drunk too much. He paid the bill and walked out. It was time to go back. A gentle breeze blew and Jiang Yuqing immediately sobered up. The many emotions in his eyes gradually subsided like the tide and faded away. However, just as he turned to leave, he suddenly saw a familiar figure in the distance. He was suddenly stunned. It was a woman wearing a red dress, and her exquisite waist could be vaguely seen. Her hair was tied up in an exquisite bun, and her black hair was like clouds. There was only an extremely simple peach blossom hairpin in it. She stood there quietly with her head slightly tilted to the side, revealing her slender and fair neck as well as the side of her beautiful face. The The surrounding lights were brilliant and the light reflected on her face. It was like the snow on a moonlit night, clean and pure, with a hint of coldness and nobility. Zhang Yuqing's heart suddenly beat faster. It's her. He almost couldn't control himself and quickly went forward, quickly passing through the crowd. There was only one person in his eyes and heart. The closer he got, the faster Zhang Yuqing's heart beat. He reached out and was about to hold the woman's hand. You, mobile user, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 844. The woman seemed to have sensed something and turned around. A beautiful face came into view. A trace of surprise flashed across her eyes. Then her red lips curled into a smile. You are... Zhang Yuqing suddenly paused. Although the woman in front of him looked like her, she wasn't her. Her eyes and brows were similar, but there were some differences. That person's eyes were always gentle and cunning. However, the woman in front of him had a pair of clear jade-like eyes that were faintly cold. It wasn't her, it wasn't her. Chu Liwei lowered her eyes and glanced at his hand that was suspended in midair. She raised her eyebrows. Although he was wearing a mask, she could still recognize Zhang Yuqing's identity from his figure, footsteps, and voice. Could it be that Zhang Yuqing had mistaken her for Shangguanyu? She hadn't heard such a title in a long time. How disgusting. Why are you here? Zhang Yuqing stiffly retracted his hand. His fingers curled and his throat seemed to be blocked by something. It took him a lot of effort to ask this question. Seeing Zhang Yuqing's shocked and disappointed expression, Chu Liwei blinked and the smile on her lips deepened. Hearing that voice that seemed to be filled with longing and joy, those who didn't know would really think that he was deeply in love with her. And he actually questioned her in such a way. How ridiculous. Could it be that Zhang Yuqing still hoped to see her in Shangguanyu again? Wasn't he the one who forced her into a dead end? What right did he have to talk to her like that? Chu Liu's mind raced, but she didn't show it on her face. She smiled faintly and said, Young master, you must have mistaken me for someone else. Came with my friends. They went in to buy things. I was waiting for them here. In fact, they had just returned to West Hill an hour ago. Originally, she wanted to rush back to the Chongshu Pavilion first, but Mu Hongyu said that they were too embarrassed now. If they went back like this, everyone would be very worried. No matter what, they had to wash up first. In fact, it wasn't just Mu Hongyu. The others, including Chu Liyue, all looked very miserable. After all, they had stayed in the Red Moon Desert for so long. The sky was filled with yellow sand and the sun was scorching hot. Their bodies were almost stinking. Chu Liwei also didn't want to go back with a bruised nose and swollen face. After some discussion, they found a temporary inn and cleaned themselves up. As Chu Liwei still had a small bruise on her forehead, Yi Ranran simply applied a thin layer of powder and dressed her up a little. Chu Liwei rarely dressed up. Seeing how insistent Yi Ranran was, she let her be. In the middle, she remembered that she hadn't worn the peach blossom hairpin Rong Xiu gave her properly, so she took it out and used it. Originally, she wanted to go back properly. She didn't expect to meet Zhang Yuqing while waiting for Mu Hongyu and the others to buy things. What bad luck. Chu Liwei sighed silently in her heart. His good mood instantly vanished without a trace. At this moment, Zhang Yuqing finally recovered from his shock. Chu Liwei. Didn't she already? He suddenly opened his eyes wide and looked at Chu Liwei in disbelief. You're still alive? Chu Liwei narrowed her eyes and raised her chin slightly. She stared into Zhang Yuqing's eyes and smiled faintly. Young master, you must be joking. I'm standing here perfectly fine. Of course I'm alive. Zhang Yuqing was in a daze for a moment. This expression, this appearance, it really did seem like that person was talking. The alcohol came back to him again and his head was a little swollen. He only looked at the woman in front of him and murmured in a low voice, It's good that you're alive. It's good that I really... At first he felt relieved. Then, as if he remembered something, his expression suddenly changed. No, the strong smell of alcohol wafted over. Chu Liwei calmly took a step back, but her eyes were still fixed on him. Zhang Yuqing's reaction was really strange. Lu Yu. At this moment, Mu Hongyu's clear voice came from the side. Chu Liwei turned her head and saw Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran rushing over. The two of them were originally happy, but then they saw an unfamiliar young man standing next to them. The way he looked at Chu Liwei was really strange. Mu Hongyu frowned and immediately walked forward. She pulled Chu Liwei over and stood in front of Jiang Yuqing without batting an eyelid, blocking his line of sight. "Lu Yu, who is this person?" Mu Hongyu asked warily. Judging from the smell of alcohol on his body, could it be that he came over to hit on Lu Yu because she was pretty? At first glance she could tell that he wasn't a good person. Chu Liwei chuckled. "I don't know him. He seems to have mistaken me for someone else." This finally made Jiang Yuqing sober up a little. He closed his eyes and only then did he remember that he was wearing another face. It was normal for them to be so vigilant. But fortunately this was the case. Otherwise it would really be. He stared at Chu Liwei and turned to leave. "Hey, what's wrong with this person?" Mu Hongyu frowned even more. He didn't even apologize for recognizing the wrong person? He doesn't look like an ordinary person. Why is he so uncultured? Chu Liwei held her wrist and shook his head lightly. "Forget it. What's the point of being calculative with this kind of person? Where's little Zhou and the rest?" Yi Ranran whispered. "Big brother Qin and the others helped him. Big brother Qin and the others said that they would help him clean up. They should be out soon, right?" Chu Liwei facepalmed. "The few men took longer than us. I really have to take my hat off to them." Thinking about little Zhou's cold face, Chu Liwei felt a slight headache. "I'm afraid only Qin Yi and the rest can suppress him." Yi Ranran looked around and sighed. "Xiling hasn't been this lively for 2 years. Last time." Speaking of this, her expression darkened. Mu Hongyu was about to ask when she suddenly thought of something and fell silent. "It should be related to that princess, right?" "What a pity." Mu Hongyu muttered. She originally admired that empress concubine a lot. Now that I finally came to Xiling, that person was no longer around. Chu Liwei smiled faintly and said meaningfully, "What's there to regret? We're in time for the third princess and eldest young Master Zhang's wedding this time. I'm sure it'll be very lively then." Digression. Faint from the heat. 38 degrees Celsius. Mobile user, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 845. The moment she said that, she heard a few familiar footsteps behind her. Chu Liwei turned around and saw Qin Yi and Lei Laosi walking in front. "We're back." Lei Laosi shouted excitedly at the few of them. Chang Wanzhou followed behind the two of them. Chu Liu's eyes lit up, and her lips curled up into a smile. Chang Wanzhou had changed into a moon-white outfit with a white jade belt around his waist, which easily outlined the youth's tall and straight posture. His soft, short, golden hair glowed faintly under the illumination of the lantern light. A few strands of hair hung down, covering his excessively sharp brows and eyes, making the aura around him seem much gentler. His nose was straight, his lips were as red as roses, and his jade-like chin was rounder than before, but he still had a youthful vibe. In the past, Chang Wanzhou always wore his old and tattered hemp clothes. His skinny body swayed in an empty manner, and he was full of wildness, just like a wild beast crawling alone, lonely and unruly. Even after he entered the Chongshu pavilion and followed beside Chu Liuye, he always looked like a gray shadow. It was Chu Liuye's first time seeing him like this, and she couldn't help but feel emotional. A good-looking person can indeed look stunning just by dressing up casually. At first glance, one would really think that he's a young master from some aristocratic family. Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran also sized up Chang Wanzhou in shock as if they had never seen him before. As if sensing their gazes, Chang Wanzhou's entire body stiffened, and he didn't know where to put his hands and feet. He quickly looked up at Chu Liuye and saw that she was smiling at him, so he couldn't help but feel even more nervous. After a short moment of embarrassment, he turned around and planned to go back. "I'll go change back. I really feel uncomfortable wearing this outfit." "Hey," Chu Liuye pulled him back. Seeing his embarrassed expression, she couldn't help but laugh in her heart. But seeing that he was already so embarrassed, she naturally couldn't add fuel to the fire. She gently patted his shoulder and said seriously, "Xiao Zhou, you're doing great." Chang Wanzhou was stunned and looked at her suspiciously. "Really?" The corners of Chu Liuye's eyes seemed to be smiling. "Really?" In the past he had always been alone. In order to survive, he had to compete with groups of wild beasts for all the resources that could be fought for. He had developed a wild nature. But things were different now. He had her and so many of them to accompany him. He would no longer be homeless and helpless like before. Looking at those black jade-like eyes, Chang Wanzhou's uneasiness gradually subsided. Haha, I knew it would definitely please her. They would like it. Lei Laosi smiled proudly at the side. At first, this fellow refused to cooperate no matter what he said. It was only after Lei Laosi persuaded him and mentioned Her Highness that he was finally persuaded. This is what a normal young man looks like. He had long wanted to say that Chang Wanzhou's usual dirty and dusty appearance was really enough. Upon hearing that, Chang Wanzhou's fair face that seemed to be translucent instantly burned up. He turned his head away awkwardly, but the tips of his ears were already red. Chu Luiyue snickered in her heart. This child was like a hedgehog. He looked like he had thorns all over his body and wasn't easy to get close to, but his heart was actually very soft. Also, his skin was especially thin. A casual tease could easily make him blush. But she raised her brows slightly and glanced at Lei Laosi. Could it be that this person found Chang Wanzhou to replace him because he couldn't show his real face to others? After all, he was indeed an elegant young master back then. But now he had to disguise himself as a burly man. Seeing that Chang Wanzhou was going to be cooked at this rate, Chu Luiyue finally spoke up out of kindness. Since everyone's here, let's go. Shifu and the rest should be anxious from waiting. As Chu Luiyue spoke, she looked at Qin Yi and Lei Laosi. Then we'll take our leave now. Qin Yi nodded lightly. Since we're already at Xiling, we won't send you off. Laosi and I will stay at the previous inn. If you need any help, feel free to look for us. Chu Luiyue replied firmly. Okay. After watching Chu Luiyue and the rest leave until they couldn't be seen, the smile on Lei Laosi's face gradually disappeared, and he glanced in a certain direction vigilantly. Big brother, that man just now, Qin Yi smiled. It's him. Lei Laosi's eyes were filled with anger. Pooey. He's really shameless. Just now we were quite far away so we didn't see the situation clearly. We only vaguely saw a man talking to Her Highness for a while before leaving. However, we couldn't be more familiar with that person's aura. Even if he turned into ashes, we would still be able to recognize him clearly. Who knows what he said to Her Highness? Then should we follow them and take a look? Lei Laosi lowered his voice and asked. Qin Yi thought for a moment and shook his head. No need. Why? Lei Laosi was a little confused. Qin Yi's eyes flickered. Naturally, it's because someone's already doing it. What? Lei Laosi was a little confused, but he seemed to have recalled something. Could it be old Seven? Previously, Her Highness mentioned that Qi Han came back with her. The two of them relied on a special yuan instrument to conceal their aura. Qi Han seemed to have used little Hachi's medicine. Even though old Seven is good at this, there seems to be someone who's better than him. A meaningful smile appeared on Qin Yi's face. I didn't expect there to be such a huge change after 2 years. Lei Laosi was still in a daze. Big brother, do you mean that someone else is secretly following Jiang Yuqing? But other than old Seven, who else could it be? Let's go. Old Seven probably doesn't know that we're back. As Qin Yi spoke, he walked forward. Lei Laosi hurriedly followed. As he walked, he pondered in his heart. Could it be that other than us and Qi Han, there are other people from the 13 Yu who have already returned to Xiling? As Jiang Yuqing walked on the streets, his mind was in a mess. The previous scene seemed to be replaying in front of his eyes. She's not her. He rubbed his glabella and wanted to shake everything off his mind. But for some reason, the more he thought about it, the clearer it became. On the bustling streets, there were many people walking to and fro. That girl in red stood there quietly, looked back and smiled brightly. With Chu Luiyue's face. For some reason, Jiang Yuqing felt a little anxious. He staggered and actually almost fell to the ground. Eldest young master. Sun Qi, who had been following in the dark, hurriedly went forward but was pushed away by Jiang Yuqing. Eldest young master, you, Sun Qi said worriedly. The number of times eldest young master gets drunk can be counted with one hand. It's not even time yet, so why? Jiang Yuqing closed his eyes. Back home. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 846. Chongshu Pavilion. Yuchi Song had just taken Chi Day's pulse again. After this period of recuperation, Although Qi Dai's body had not completely recovered, his condition had stabilized. Only his mind was still not very clear. Most of the day he was in a daze. In addition, he was already mute, so he could not say anything. Everyone in the Chongshu pavilion did not understand why the pavilion master kept this person. However, seeing that the pavilion master's attitude was firm, they did not ask further. They only did their duty and did what they had to do. Yuchi Song took out a pill and fed it to Qi Dai. He lay on the bed and whimpered twice. A hint of struggle appeared in his eyes. Yuchi Song's heart skipped a beat. To have such a reaction meant that Qi Dai had started to improve. If everything went smoothly. Suddenly he seemed to have sensed something and turned around to look outside the door. This aura, this fluctuation. Pavilion master, what's wrong? The two disciples beside him were confused. Yuchi Song quickly got up and hurriedly said, "Take care of Qi Dai." Then he hurriedly left. It was already nighttime. Most of the disciples in the Chongshu pavilion had already gone back to rest. It was quiet all around. Yuchi Song quickly walked forward. Lu Xiao, who had just come out of the medicinal garden, happened to bump into Yuchi Song. Seeing the pavilion master in such a hurry, Lu Xiao felt strange. After bowing, he asked, "Pavilion master, are you going down the mountain? It's already so late." Yuchi Song did not stop walking. He could not suppress the joy and excitement in his heart. "No, I'm going to pick up Lu Yu and the others." Lu Xiao was stunned. "Who needs you to personally?" Suddenly, his eyes widened and he cried out in shock. "You mean little junior sister and the others are back?" Yuchi Song could not help but smile. "That's right, it's them." Hearing this affirmative answer, Lu Xiao let out an excited howl and immediately followed. Me. I'll go too." Before he finished speaking, he had already rushed out and headed straight for the mountain gate. In the blink of an eye, he had already run in front of Yuchi Song. Yuchi Song looked at his back and could not help but shake his head and laugh. There were very few people in the Chongshu pavilion. For convenience and safety, everyone lived close to each other. Therefore, Lu Xiao's shout immediately attracted the attention of many people. People walked out of the pavilion master, their faces blank. What were the pavilion master and Lu Xiao doing so late at night? A disciple asked. "Pavilion master, this is junior sister. Little junior brother. Ran. It's really you." Lu Xiao's voice was very loud and this shout was full of energy. It was difficult for everyone not to hear it even if they wanted to. After a short of song, of course. "What? Giao of song of?" Lu and the others. "And the of that's. Did they really come back?" "Look!" Amidst the chaos, someone suddenly shouted. Everyone looked over and saw a few figures walking up the stairs. The person in front was Lu Xiao, who was laughing so hard. The few behind him, Chu Luiyue, Chong Wanzhou, Yi Ranran, everyone was dumbfounded. Although the pavilion master had always said that they would return safely, everyone in the pavilion was actually very worried. After all, it was the Dahuang swamp. What a dangerous place. They waited day and night, their hearts filled with anxiety. They did not expect them to return so suddenly. Lu Xiao couldn't help but whistle and laugh proudly. "Haha. What are you all waiting for? Hurry up and welcome junior sister and junior brother home." Only then did everyone come back to their senses. The shock on their faces gradually faded, leaving only joy and relief. Ran. Junior sister. Junior brother. Chu Luiyue and the others had just come up. Before they could greet everyone properly, they were immediately surrounded by their senior brothers and senior sisters. Ran, are you guys alright? Why are you only back now? Are you injured? What's the situation in the Dahuang swamp? Junior sister, tell us quickly. Chu Luiyue felt a headache coming on. His passion was like fire. For a moment he really couldn't bear it. Yi Ranran was a soft person. When she saw such a scene, her small round face flushed red and she couldn't say a single word. Chong Wanzhou was even more so. The cold air on his body was constantly emitting, and it was simply freezing people to death. Unfortunately, everyone was too excited at this moment and no one noticed this. Because he had changed his outfit, the senior brothers and senior sisters could not help but praise him. Junior brother is so good looking. It couldn't be helped. When people were too happy, it was indeed easy to ignore many things. Chong Wanzhou's face darkened even more, but his ears turned red again. The hand holding the sword was ready to move, But when he thought about how these people were actually happy that they had returned alive, he could not take a step forward. Thus, only Chu Luiyue was left, who could barely hold the situation. Senior brothers and senior sisters, this is a long story. Let's go in and talk? Chu Luiyue was discussing with everyone. As soon as he finished speaking, Lu Xiao waved his arm and shouted. Junior sister said to go in and talk in detail. Everyone heard his words clearly. After a moment of silence, the atmosphere became even more lively. Everyone clustered around the few of them as they walked inside. Quick, bring junior sister and the others back to sit down and talk. Pour tea. I'll serve tea. Hey, have you guys eaten yet? Do you want some snacks first? Don't squeeze junior sister and the others. Make way. It wasn't that Chu Luiyue didn't expect them to be welcomed back, but she never expected it to be like this. Surrounded by the crowd, Chu Luiyue suddenly felt weak, pitiful and helpless. She glanced at Yuchi Song, who was standing next to her. Master, please save your disciple. However, before Yuchi Song could answer, a group of people had already crowded around them and walked forward. Yuchi Song looked at the scene in front of him with a smile. He sighed inwardly and his eyes were slightly warm. Elder Xiai heard the commotion and rushed over. When he saw the noisy scene, he couldn't help but laugh. Our Chongshu Pavilion hasn't been so lively in a long time. In the past 2 years, the people of Chongshu Pavilion had either died, been injured or left. Even they themselves felt a little miserable. They didn't expect to see such a lively day. Yuchi Song put his hands behind his back and sighed. That's right. This liveliness is all because of Chu Luiyue and the others. Elder Xiai patted Yuchi Song on the shoulder. Let's go. Let's go celebrate the children's safe return. Yuchi Song also smiled. Let's go. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 847. That night, the Chongshu Pavilion was lively for once. Everyone was excited and joyful. They surrounded Chu Luiyue and the others and looked at them from head to toe. Thus, Chu Luiyue decided to tell him everything that had happened. Of course, most of the details were picked out. While she was trapped underground, Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran filled in the details of what had happened outside. Everyone was filled with emotion after listening to the story. Lu Xiao couldn't help but say, "Why are you so late? No wonder you guys came back so late. So you actually encountered so many things. What exactly is going on in the Red Moon Desert? You've all suffered a lot, haven't you?" Of course, Chu Luiyue didn't expose Debao and the others. She only said that she didn't know what was going on. Yi Ranran refuted in a low voice. Actually, we didn't suffer that much and our strength has increased a lot. Although they were tired at the time, when they thought about it later, they realized that they had benefited the most from it. In that case, it was indeed a great opportunity. Dahuang Swamp is unpredictable. Although it's full of danger, there are indeed many opportunities. You've all gained a lot from this trip. It wasn't a wasted trip. Elder Xia Yi said happily. It was already a happy thing that these people could return safely, but he didn't expect that their cultivation had increased by different degrees. This was a pleasant surprise. Chu Luiyue in particular had become a 6th-stage warrior. Such a cultivation speed was heaven-defying. In comparison, the people who had returned earlier had basically returned empty-handed. Some of them had even suffered extremely serious injuries. Everyone thought that the disciples of the Chongshu Pavilion had been wiped out this time, but who would have thought that they would be the ones who benefited the most in the end? If word of this got out, it would attract a lot of envy. The group chatted for a long time, wishing they could ask all the questions they could. When Chu Luiyue and the others were almost overwhelmed, Yuchi Song finally spoke up to help. Alright, it's too late today. They've just returned, so let them rest first. If there's anything, we can talk about it later. Since the pavilion master had spoken, although everyone was reluctant, they still got up and left. However, seeing how excited they were, they might not be able to sleep peacefully when they returned. Everyone left one after another. Even Mu Hongyu and the others also dispersed. Only Chu Luiyue and Yuchi Song were left in the room. Chu Luiyue understood that his master had something to ask him. Sure enough, after everyone left, Yuchi Song looked at her and asked, "You said earlier that you plucked the dancing lotus?" Chu Luiyue nodded. Yuchi Song frowned slightly, a trace of doubt flashing in his eyes. Then have you ever met a tall man in black? Chu Liyue's heart stirred. Could he be asking about the first master? Seeing her reaction, Yuchi Song already knew what was going on. It seemed that Chu Liyue had also met that man. But at that time that man clearly said that the flower belonged to his wife. Why did he allow Chu Liyue to pluck it? Didn't he stop you when you plucked the dancing lotus? Chu Liyue blinked and asked curiously, why would he stop me? In fact, it was the first master who urged her to pluck it. Seeing Yuchi Song's stunned face, Chu Liyue thought for a moment and said, actually I know that person. You know him. Yuchi Song was even more shocked. Liyue actually knows such a strong and powerful person? Chu Liyue nodded. For some reason he helped me a lot. So, then do you know who he is? There was almost no such person in the Tianling dynasty. Chu Liyue shook her head. His background is mysterious. I don't know more about him. Yuchi Song was a little disappointed, but seeing that Chu Liyue really didn't seem to know, he didn't continue asking. Then he suddenly thought of something and said, oh right. By the way, the fact that you brought the dancing lotus back will probably be known by others very soon. As for the third princess, Chu Liyue's lips curled up. Master, are you worried that the third princess will ask me for the dancing lotus? Although it sounded nice, in reality, according to Shangguan Wan's personality, there was a high chance that she would directly snatch it. The noble third princess went around asking for medicine in order to improve His Majesty's health. It didn't sound wrong. Yuchi Song wanted to say something but hesitated. In the end he nodded. The dancing lotus was such a precious treasure. Even the Tianling royal family didn't have it. It was obvious how precious it was. Anyone in the world who obtained it would probably treasure it. No one would be willing to let it be snatched away halfway. Moreover, Lu Yu must have suffered a lot in Dahuang Swamp. His heart really ached. However, Chu Liyue didn't seem to be worried at all. She smiled faintly and there seemed to be flowing light in her eyes. She wants it, she can come and get it. The Chongshu Pavilion was overjoyed and bustling with noise and excitement. However, some people in Xiling City weren't so happy. Jiang Yuqing walked all the way back. The slightly cold night wind blew and the corner of his clothes fluttered. He originally thought that this would sober him up, but he quickly realized that it didn't. This was because his mind was still replaying the scene just now. That woman was wearing a red dress and her black hair was like the clouds. She was the only one who occupied his line of sight on the busy street. She looked back and smiled. She was beautiful, pure and moving. Jiang Yuqing returned to his residence. He paused in the courtyard and walked towards the study. He entered the study alone, closed the door and windows and then walked to the table and sat down. After a while he finally took out a rectangular sandalwood box from under the table. With a click the box opened. A picture scroll was lying quietly in the middle of it. Jiang Yuqing hesitated for a moment, but still took it out and slowly unfolded it. It was a woman in the painting. The woman stood by the lake, wearing a luxurious palace dress and a golden hairpin in her hair. She was dignified and noble. However, at this moment she seemed to have heard something. She turned around with a bright smile on her face. That smile was different from her usual gentle and polite smile. It was sly and quick-witted and her eyes were like stars. It was Shangguan Yu. She looked like she was in her teens in the painting, and there was still a hint of youthfulness on her face. However, between her eyebrows, there was already a hint of absolute beauty. This was a scene from many years ago. In fact, even the real Shangguan Yu didn't know that he had such a painting. He originally wanted to show it to her. Suddenly, a series of familiar footsteps came from outside. Jiang Yuqing frowned. So late. What is Shangguan Wan doing here? Almost without thinking, he immediately rolled up the painting. The moment he put it in the box, someone directly pushed the door open and entered. Yuqing. Shangguan Wan had just shouted when she saw Jiang Yuqing hiding something in a panic. She knitted her brows. What are you hiding? A better reading experience came from the Love Network. Chapter 848. It's nothing. Jiang Yuqing looked up and his expression had already returned to normal. Why did you come at this time? Shangguan Wan looked at him suspiciously. I saw that it seemed to be a painting just now. What kind of painting would make him so wary? There were almost no secrets between the two of us. and she had almost never seen Jiang Yuqing so nervous that he wanted to hide something. It must be a masterpiece for you to take it out and admire it in the middle of the night. Why don't you take it out and let me take a look? Asked Shangguan as she took a step forward. However, Jiang Yuqing's expression was very nonchalant. It's not a masterpiece. I just found it by accident. There's nothing to see. Shangguan couldn't maintain the smile on her face. It's just a painting. It would be fine if he openly took it out for me to see, but he didn't. There must be something wrong with him for him to hide it from me. Shangguan glanced at the spot where Jiang Yuqing put the item back. Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows. As if sensing that Jiang Yuqing wasn't in a good mood, Shangguan quickly retracted her gaze. I didn't come here today to quarrel with him. Thinking of the purpose of this trip, Shangguan's expression became much gentler. I came here secretly this time. Don't worry, no one will know. Everyone in this yard was Jiang Yuqing's confidant, so she wasn't worried that this matter would spread. She took a few steps forward. Shui, you drank? Shangguan's expression changed slightly. Previously she was quite far away, so she didn't notice it. Now that she was standing closer, she then realized that Jiang Yuqing reeked of alcohol. Upon closer inspection, his eyes were slightly bloodshot, and there was a hint of blurriness in his eyes. He seemed to be a little drunk. Jiang Yuqing had always been very restrained. He would never drink excessively and he wouldn't let himself get drunk. What was going on? Yuqing, what exactly happened to you? She asked as she reached for him. Jiang Yuqing calmly avoided her hand. I'm fine. If you have anything to say, just say it. Shangguan's heart felt a little empty after her attack failed. She bit her lip. In fact, she had recently discovered that Jiang Yuqing was becoming more and more impatient and perfunctory towards her. However, although his attitude was distant as her fiancé, he had done everything that he should, so no one could find fault with him. This made Shangguan even more aggrieved. She couldn't find a place to vent her anger. She gritted her teeth and suppressed the dissatisfaction and resentment in her heart. I came here today to ask you for the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill. Jiang Yuqing frowned instantly. What did you say? Shangguan was in a difficult position. I also know that I shouldn't do this, but I'm only one step away from recovering my Yuan meridian. There are only 3 days left until the wedding, so I can't do anything else. Even if I forcefully try, I'll at most have a low-grade Daijing Yuan meridian. You want to use the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill to raise your Yuan meridian level. Jiang Yuqing interrupted her. Shangguan nodded. Originally she didn't think of this. It was only after that person reminded her that she suddenly realized that even if she forcefully recovered her Daijing Yuan meridian, it would be very difficult for her to successfully raise the Tianling scepter. The most convenient thing was naturally the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill. I know that you gave that item to Xiahou Rong previously, and he definitely won't be willing to return it. However, I can use other things to exchange for it. As long as the item is lost. Jiang Yuqing's voice was very cold. Shangguan was suddenly stunned. What is lost? Jiang Yuqing enunciated every word clearly. The 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill has already been stolen by someone. Shangguan naturally didn't believe him. However, looking at Jiang Yuqing's expression, it didn't seem like he was faking it. He was secretly angry. When can you get it back? Jiang Yuqing lowered his eyes. I don't know. Then what should I do? Shangguan didn't have the patience to continue pretending. If I can't raise the Tianling scepter, that's your problem. Jiang Yuqing already smelled of alcohol and his mind was in a mess, so his words weren't very polite. No matter what, you're the 3rd princess with the Tianling royal family's bloodline. This is something you should think about and solve yourself. He rubbed his brows in frustration. If it were Yu, she definitely wouldn't be troubled by such things. As soon as he finished speaking, the room instantly fell into dead silence. Shangguan felt like she was struck by lightning. She widened her eyes in disbelief and stared at Jiang Yuqing. What did you just say? Jiang Yuqing also realized that his words were wrong and his voice softened. I was just saying casually. Don't take it to heart. You still have her in your heart, don't you? Shangguan suddenly grabbed his wrist, her eyes filled with deep resentment and jealousy. You also think that I'm inferior to her in every aspect, don't you? Jiang Yuqing controlled his temper. You're thinking too much. If it was really as you said, I wouldn't have done that back then. Thinking of the fire back then, Shang Guanwan gritted her teeth and shook off Jiang Yuqing's hand. Jiang Yuqing, you better remember what you promised me. With that she turned around and left angrily. Jiang Yuqing stopped her again. Wait, I asked you to go to His Majesty's place to take a look. How's the situation? Shang Guanwan choked. Actually, she didn't take this matter to heart at all. She only went there once or twice and stayed there for a while before coming out. Jiang Yuqing warned. Don't you know how important His Majesty's sobriety is to us? Okay, I got it. I know what to do. Shang Guanwan walked around him in annoyance and left quickly. After this commotion, Jiang Yuqing finally sobered up. He thought for a while, walked over, weighed the wooden box and thought for a while. Actually, there's really no need to keep this thing. He acted like he wanted to burn it, but after going back and forth a few times, he couldn't bear to and could only put it back. Knock knock. Knocking sounds were suddenly heard. Eldest young master Lord Xiahou is here. Xiahou Rong. Let him in. Jiang Yuqing sat down on the chair. Then Xiahou Rong came in. He was wearing a black shirt which completely covered his body. In the dark, if one didn't look closely, one wouldn't be able to recognize him. Behind him there was a person who was wrapped up tightly. Xiahou Tingon. Jiang Yuqing leaned against the chair and looked at the two of them coldly. It seems like Lord Xiahou is here to return the item? Upon hearing this, Xiahou Rong was instantly embarrassed. He swallowed his saliva with much difficulty and immediately scolded Xiahou Tingon. Hurry and apologize to eldest young master. Xiahou Tingon knelt on the floor and seemed to be quite injured. Why, eldest young master, you don't have to say this. Jiang Yuqing didn't have much patience with him and went straight to the point. Return the item first. We'll talk about the rest later. Xiahou Rong's face turned pale. Eldest young master, that thing is gone. A better reading experience came from the Love Network. Chapter 849. This is what happened. Now we don't even know where that item is, so we can't find it even if we want to. Xiahou Rong fearfully recounted everything, and Xiahou Tingon kept kneeling on the floor, looking like he was admitting his mistake. It's all my fault for not teaching him well, which is why I allowed my unfilial son to do such a thing. He really deserves to die. But eldest young master, please spare his life on my account. Perhaps we can still identify that person. Xiahou Rong had never begged anyone so humbly before. Now for Xiahou Tingon, he had completely thrown away his pride. Jiang Yuqing was enraged, and he almost laughed out of anger when he heard the last part. Officer Xiahou, do you know what you're saying? Xiahou Rong's voice suddenly stopped. Actually, he was also very perturbed in his heart. Not only did they lose a 9 clouds yuan recovery pill, but they might also attract a huge disaster. The other party's plan was so meticulous and their actions were so decisive. They clearly came prepared. If they were exposed by someone, the consequences would be unimaginable. Xiahou Rong trembled and used his sleeves to wipe the sweat on his forehead. Actually, he didn't dare to tell Jiang Yuqing that someone might have heard what he said that day. If Jiang Yuqing knew about this, not only would he not be able to protect Xiahou Tingon, but even he might not be able to escape. Xiahou Rong argued. Eldest young master, I know that we're in the wrong, but apart from coming clean with you today, I also want to try to make up for our mistakes. Jiang Yuqing sneered and stared at him as if he had heard the biggest joke in the world. Make up for our mistakes? Why's eldest young master? Think about it. How many people in the world can arrange such a meticulous plan and specially steal the 9 clouds yuan recovery pill? Jiang Yuqing's expression changed. You mean, eldest young master, those people have probably secretly returned. Shang Guanwan returned to the palace in anger and threw a huge tantrum in Huayang Palace. She wasn't sure which of Jiang Yuqing's words were true and which were false. However, if Jiang Yuqing had made up his mind and did not intend to give her the 9 clouds yuan recovery pill, then no matter how much trouble she made, it would be useless. Therefore, after losing her temper, Shang Guanwan decided to forcefully restore her yuan meridian after much consideration. If she still had some expectations and longing for Jiang Yuqing before, then his words today had completely shattered her fantasies. Regardless of whether he said it intentionally or not, Shang Guanwan was already unforgivable. After thinking about it, she still felt that it was better to rely on herself than on anyone else. Thus, after a long period of consideration, she finally decided to forcefully restore her Yuan meridian. The next day, Chu Luiyue and the others personally sent Mu Hongyu back to Dragon Teeth Mountain. The news of their safe return from the Great Desolate Swamp quickly spread throughout the entire Western Tomb. For a time, everyone was discussing with different reactions. There were those who rejoiced and there were those who were jealous. Previously, everyone thought that they were dead. Now that they had suddenly appeared, how could they not be curious? At the same time, another piece of news spread to everyone's ears. Chu Luiyue had not only successfully contracted a divine beast in the Great Desolate Swamp, but he had also plucked a dancing lotus. No matter which one it would cause countless people to be envious, jealous, and hateful. One had to know that in the entire Tianling dynasty, apart from the Taizu of the past, no one else had contracted a divine beast. And that dancing lotus was a supreme-grade medicinal herb that only bloomed once every 500 years. Previously, the third princess had led 1,000 black cavalry troops and several sect disciples to the Great Desolate Swamp for the blood of the divine beast and such treasures. In the end, not only did they not obtain anything, but they also suffered heavy casualties and returned in defeat. Now compared to Chu Luiyue's situation, it was really too embarrassing. On the other side, Shang Wanwan had finally completely restored her Yuan meridian on the day before her wedding after 2 days of bitter cultivation. However, just as she had expected, her Yuan meridian had just barely entered the level of the Daijing Yuan meridian. Compared to ordinary people, this might be considered not bad. However, for her status, it was far from enough. In Xiling City, there were many geniuses with the Daijing Yuan meridian, and she was not even ranked among them. This made Shang Wanwan very unhappy, but there was nothing she could do at the moment. After all, it was already very difficult to successfully restore her Yuan meridian. Thinking of this, Shang Wanwan secretly cursed in her heart. If Shang Wanyu hadn't destroyed her Yuan meridian back then, she wouldn't have fallen to such a state today. Thinking that tomorrow was the day of her wedding, Shang Wanwan suppressed the resentment in her heart with great difficulty and planned to see if her father showed any signs of waking up. Shang Wanwan brought Chani to Qingfeng Hall. However, on the way there, Shang Wanwan realized that the atmosphere in the palace seemed a little off. She couldn't tell what the problem was, but she felt that the palace servants seemed to be looking at her differently than before, as if there was a deeper meaning behind their gazes. When she arrived outside Qingfeng Hall, just as she was about to step in, she heard whispers coming from inside. "Hey, have you guys heard? Tui is back." This sentence was like a clap of thunder that exploded in Shang Wanwan's mind. She was momentarily dazed. Chu Luiyue is back. How is this possible? Isn't she dead? When Chani heard this voice, she immediately wanted to go forward and reprimand her, but Shang Wanwan pulled her back. The voices of the palace servants came one after another. Why haven't we heard? It's not just her. Even the disciples of the Chongshu Pavilion are all fine. What does this mean? The important thing is, she contracted with a divine beast. That's a divine beast. I heard that she even brought back the dancing lotus, the treasure that Her Highness the Third Princess was injured because of. Originally, everyone said that Chu Luiyue was already dead, but who knew that Chu Luiyue's fortuitous opportunity was simply heaven-defying? Isn't this a slap to Her Highness the Third Princess's face? She brought so many people and put on such a big show, but in the end she didn't get anything. Instead, she couldn't even compare to a little girl who was fighting alone. If I were the third princess, I would be so ashamed that I would dig a hole in the ground and hide in it. Chapter 850. Chani's expression darkened as she glanced at Shang Wanwan. This servant will deal with these sluts right now. Shang Wanwan raised her hand to stop her, then walked over. She turned around and stepped through the door, only to see the palace servants whispering to each other. What are you talking about? Shang Wanwan asked darkly. This voice shocked the palace servants. When they saw that the person who came was Shang Wanwan, their faces turned pale and they knelt down one after another. Your Highness, spare us. Your Highness, spare us. She must have heard what they said just now. You said that Chu Luiyue is back? Shang Wanwan asked softly. Although his tone was calm in the ears of the palace servants, it was extremely dangerous. No, we didn't, slap. Chani stepped forward and gave the person who spoke a harsh slap to the face. Her Highness is asking you a question. Confess honestly. If you lie, I'll cut out your tongues. Chani had always been powerful, and everyone in the palace knew that she was vicious and merciless. They all feared her. Seeing her act up, they were even more worried. How could they dare to hide anything? Immediately they told him everything they knew. The more Shangguanwan listened, the colder her expression became. Where did you hear all this from? Yes, the palace is already abuzz with the news. We only heard it by accident. Your Highness, please understand. The palace servants also felt that they had been wronged. Right now it wasn't just the palace. Everyone in Xiling City was probably talking about this matter. Yet they were the ones who were caught. If the third princess really wanted to punish them, how could she do it? Shangguanwan's eyelids twitched. How could she not understand what they were implying? This also meant that everyone already knew about Tu Liuyue's matters, but she knew nothing about it. She just happened to be in seclusion to repair her Yuan meridian. She didn't expect such a big thing to happen outside. Chani also realized that something was wrong and quickly apologized. Your Highness, it's all because of this servant's negligence. She had been guarding outside Huayang Hall all this time. She didn't even go out of the door. The people below were afraid of her. How could they take the initiative to tell her these things? Therefore, when everyone knew about this, Shangguanwan became the last person to know. Her expression changed a few times, then she turned around and left. Chani asked subconsciously. Your Highness, His Majesty, we've already arrived at Clear Wind Palace. Does His Highness not intend to go in and take a look? Shangguanwan smiled coldly. This consort has more important things to do. Go invite Tu Liwei into the palace. Just ask her to treat Imperial Father with the divine beast and the dancing lotus. Since that Tu Liwei was so powerful, he naturally had to make good use of him. Xiling City. In a house on Six Clouds Street, Chu Liwei was sitting by the window playing chess with himself. The white pieces were ferocious, but the black pieces had already quietly formed an encirclement. As long as he slashed down, he would be able to kill the white pieces. How boring. Chu Liwei muttered to herself. Playing chess with herself wasn't very interesting. If Rong Xiu was here. At this moment, Chong Wanzhou walked in with ginger tea and replaced the old tea beside her that had already turned cold. Chu Liwei stopped and threw the black pieces back into the jar. She looked up and smiled. Little Zhou, aren't you too familiar with doing this? You even know when to change the tea. It wasn't good if it was too hot or too cold. When she was focused on playing chess, she would often neglect the time. However, she could always drink tea that tasted just right. All of this was naturally because of Little Zhou. She didn't know how that person with Little Zhou had tortured him back then. Little Zhou lowered his eyes slightly, his long eyelashes fluttering. These are all small matters. If I can't even do this well, then I'm too useless. He had already done these things many times and was very familiar with them. He could even do it with his eyes closed. Knock knock. Knocking sounds suddenly came from outside. Chu Liwei raised her brows slightly. Invite them in. Chong Wanzhou didn't ask anything and just nodded before turning to open the door. With a creak, the door opened. Qin Yi and Lei Laosi were standing outside. Qin Yi smiled lightly. It seems like we didn't find the wrong place. It's indeed here. Chong Wanzhou's eyes flickered and he immediately took a step back to invite the two of them in. Please. Qin Yi nodded and walked in with Lei Laosi. Lei Laosi looked around and couldn't help but mutter. Isn't this Elder Song's residence? It seems like it has already become Her Highness's residence. Qin Yi's lips curved up slightly, and something seemed to have flashed across his long and narrow eyes. Elder Song has always been a righteous person. Her Highness used to like coming to this place a lot. I heard that Yuchi Song sold a lot of things when he was in trouble, but he didn't touch this residence in the end. After going through so much trouble, it finally became Her Highness's. It's considered fate. Chong Wanzhou followed behind the two of them and frowned slightly. In the 2 days since they returned to Xiling, Chu Liwei basically spent the rest of her time here other than the first night at Chongshu Pavilion. Over here she basically played chess and read books, looking very relaxed as if she didn't know that the people outside were talking about her. In just one night, such shocking news spread throughout the entire Xiling. No one would believe that there wasn't a mastermind behind it. However, very few people knew that the mastermind was actually Chu Liwei herself. Today, Qin Yi and Lei Laosi even directly came to visit her. Logically speaking, it should be their first time here, but they looked very familiar with this place. The two of them clearly knew where to go and what to put there, so they didn't need Chang Wanzhou to lead the way. Chang Wanzhou pressed his lips against each other. Previously, he had already vaguely sensed that the two of them should have known Chu Liwei for a long time. In fact, the two of them had always been very respectful to her. Normal people might not be able to tell, but Chang Wanzhou was extremely sensitive in this aspect, so he could see it very clearly. No matter if it was Qin Yi or Lei Laosi, they were both very strong. Chu Liwei was much weaker than them, so logically speaking, they shouldn't have such an attitude toward Chu Liwei. Not to mention, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant that they spent so much effort to guard had formed an agreement with Chu Liwei after it broke through. All of this pointed to a shocking answer. Chang Wanzhou knew that there must be a huge secret behind it. The few of them walked in and quickly reached the front hall where Chu Liwei was. Upon hearing the commotion, Chu Liwei looked up and smiled at the two of them. "You guys came at the right time. I was just about to look for you guys." Qin Yi glanced at the half-finished chessboard on the table and smiled. Her Highness really likes to joke like before. She's clearly waiting for us to come. Chu Liu's lips curled up slightly as she looked at Chang Wanzhou, who was about to go out. "Little Zhou, come in and talk too." Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios mobile users, please browse and read. Chapter 851. The remaining 3 people were stunned. "What do you mean? I'll just stand guard outside." Chang Wanzhou glanced at Qin Yi and Lei Laosi as he spoke with pursed lips. Chu Liwei smiled but was very insistent. "It's okay. Even if Qin Yi is in the room, he can still monitor the entire courtyard." Qin Yi raised his brows. Chang Wanzhou hesitated for a moment before finally following him in. Lei Laosi glanced at Chang Wanzhou, then at Chu Liwei. In the end, he couldn't help but look at his eldest brother for help. "Is Her Highness not planning to avoid this fellow?" "Qin Yi, sorry to trouble you," said Chu Liwei. Qin Yi raised his hand and a wooden cicada appeared in his palm. The wooden cicada's workmanship was extremely exquisite and lifelike. He raised his wrist and the wooden cicada flew out. "If there's any movement within a radius of 2.5 kilometers, it will immediately discover it," explained Qin Yi. Then he set up a green barrier in the room, isolating their voices from the outside world. Chu Liwei smiled. "I've always been assured when you do things." Qin Yi's expression became serious, and a faint smile appeared on his picturesque face. This made his originally apathetic expression suddenly become lively. Then he bowed respectfully toward Chu Liwei. "Qin Yi will naturally do my best for Your Highness." Chang Wanzhou, who had just walked to Chu Liu's side, narrowed his eyes. "Your Highness, how many people in the world can use this form of address?" Furthermore, this came from a top elite like Qin Yi. Chu Liwei actually had mixed feelings when he heard this form of address again. "Nan Yi Ling Si, it's been hard on you these 2 years." Qin Yi's expression changed slightly. Lei Laosi's eyes actually turned red for a moment. "If Your Highness can return safely, we won't have to suffer. We'll follow Your Highness until death." With Your Highness's words, these 2 years of bitter waiting and suffering weren't in vain. Chang Wanzhou looked down. As expected, their names and identities were all different. And to be able to make such an expert follow him to the death. Chu Liu's identity was obviously not ordinary. She's definitely not just a lady from a small country, Yaochen. Chang Wanzhou vaguely felt that a curtain was slowly opening in front of him. Once that curtain was opened, it would definitely cause everyone to be extremely shocked. This was only the tip of the iceberg. "Qin Yi, Your Highness, we've all changed our identities. For safety's sake, please call us by our current names." Chu Liwei thought for a moment, then nodded and sighed. "If I hadn't trusted the scoundrel so easily back then, I wouldn't have ended up like this today. You guys wouldn't even be able to use your original names, and the 13 you guards were all great. Any one of them would be an elite among elites. They were willing to follow her." She didn't know how much they had suffered, but they were still loyal to her. But in the end, they only had the bad reputation of betraying their master. They could only run away and wander around, suffering between life and death day and night. Even now, they had to change their identities when they returned to Xiling. They couldn't even use their real names. Your Highness, you don't have to blame yourself. You've been extremely benevolent to them. They only did this because they were too greedy and despicable. If you want to talk about hatred, you should hate those people who betrayed you back then. Big Brother is right. Your Highness, how did you treat them back then? In the end, once Lei Laosi thought about what happened back then, he became agitated. Even though 2 years had already passed, the scene back then was still as clear as yesterday. These people should be hacked into pieces. At this moment, Qin Yi suddenly looked outside and smiled. Someone's here. A figure silently appeared outside the door. It was Qi Han. Big Brother, it's indeed you guys. Qi Han heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the few people in the room. When he was outside just now, he vaguely felt that it was Big Brother's doing. Now that he came in to take a look, it was indeed so. Chu Liwei curved her eyes. Qi Han, you even brought someone here? As she spoke, she looked behind Qi Han. A figure suddenly jumped out. Aya, Your Highness, can't you pretend that you didn't see me? That was a young man who looked no more than 12 or 13 years old. His face still had some childishness, but he also vaguely had the aura of a young man. His pair of round eyes were very lively, and when he smiled, his eyes curved into crescents. Chu Liwei was a little shocked. Little 13, you've actually grown so tall already? I remember that I was still a little boy before. Little 13 wrinkled his nose. You haven't seen me for 2 years, so I naturally grew up quite a bit. Children at this age always hoped that they would grow up quickly and even like to pretend to be very mature. However, between his words and actions, there was always a hint of childishness, which made people not know whether to laugh or cry. Speaking of this, he quickened his pace and stopped in front of Chu Liwei before he asked curiously, But Your Highness, why do you look different from before? Based on the aura, it was indeed Her Highness. But this appearance, 13. Qi Han called out to him in warning. 13 immediately shuddered and covered his mouth. Oh no. Previously, 7th brother said that after he came, he must not speak carelessly. However, he was too happy to see Her Highness and forgot for a moment. Qi Han, why are you shouting at him? Chu Liwei glanced at Qi Han and waved at 13. 13, don't be afraid. 13 hurriedly ran over and hid beside Chu Liwei. He stuck his tongue out at Qi Han, proud and happy. Qi Han restrained his expression and cupped his fists. Your Highness, please forgive me. I didn't tell 13 much about what happened before. In fact, they didn't even tell 13 about Her Highness's death. They only told him that Her Highness was harmed by someone, but she had her own plans and would return in the future. Therefore, while everyone was waiting in torment, only 13 was kept in the dark. He cultivated peacefully while waiting for her return. Chu Liwei nodded. This was actually the best. 13 was the youngest, so all of them had always treated him like a child. Some things were indeed better kept from him. That's not important. 13, you seem to have improved a lot in the past 2 years. Your ability to hide is almost as good as your 7th brother's, right? Chu Liwei was really surprised about this. 13 was very talented in this aspect. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought him along. However, the speed of his improvement still exceeded everyone's expectations. When 13 heard this, he immediately said proudly, Of course. You don't know, but recently I've been secretly tracking Jiang Yuqing's whereabouts. Chu Liwei asked with great interest. Then what did you find out? Digression. Mobile users at 6 o'clock, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 852. Back in the room, 13 recounted everything he had found out about the recent investigation. Qi Han added a few sentences from time to time. Chu Liwei then realized that the 4 people in front of her weren't the only ones from the 13U guard who returned to Xiling. More importantly, Qi Han and the rest actually worked together with Jian Fengqi and Shui Lu. Previously, when she sent Mu Hongyu back to Dragon Teeth Mountain, she didn't meet Jian Fengqi, so she didn't know about this. As she listened, Chu Liwei then realized that Xiling had already set up a giant net. Other than the many preparations I made, the various parties had also made preparations in the open and in the dark. After a long time, Chu Liwei finished listening to their arrangements and let out a long sigh as she lamented in her heart. At this moment she finally understood that she wasn't fighting alone from the beginning to the end. In the 2 years after she died, There were always people running around for her. Unknowingly, there seemed to be someone helping her plan everything. Unknowingly, there was an invisible hand controlling everything for her and gathering all of her remaining strength. Just for today. Who exactly is this person? Your Highness, what do you plan to do next? Qini asked gently. Based on the evidence they currently had, they could basically reconstruct the truth from back then. But other than that, the most important thing was Chu Liuyue's identity. They could clear Her Highness's name, but it would be difficult for Her Highness to regain her position again. After all, she had already changed her physical body, so it wouldn't be easy for her to gain everyone's recognition. Back then, the news of the princess's death spread like wildfire. Even if an identical face appeared, everyone might not believe it. Besides, I'm indeed Chu Liyue now. If I don't have enough evidence to prove that I stole someone's body, it would be hard for people to believe me. At this moment, a commotion suddenly came from outside. Everyone in the room was extremely sensitive and they all looked over. Who would come here at this time? Qini narrowed his eyes. It seems to be someone from the palace. Chu Liuyue's red lips curved slightly. They sure came quickly. She stood up and raised her chin. Yes, this is my plan. They looked at each other. Does His Highness intend to fight them head-on? You guys stay put for now. I'm going to meet Shangguan. Today I'll send her some dishes. Tomorrow I'll prepare a big gift. Yes. When Qin Yi and the others heard that, they immediately hid themselves. Soon only Chu Liyue and Chang Wanzhou were left in the room. Chu Liyue lifted his foot and walked outside. However, as soon as he took a step forward, he was stopped by Chang Wanzhou. Wait. Chu Liyue turned around. Chang Wanzhou looked at her with a complicated gaze. There seemed to be countless emotions surging in his eyes. Today's shock was so great that even he couldn't digest it all in a short time. You are the Empress concubine? He said the last two words very softly. Even though he grew up in Nanjiang, he had heard of the legendary princess of the Tianling dynasty. Everyone said that she had died 2 years ago due to qi deviation while practicing martial arts. However, all the things that happened so far all showed that Chu Liyue was her. As ridiculous as it may sound, it's true that. Don't you already know the answer? Chu Liyue continued to smile as if she didn't care about this matter. Chang Wanzhou was stunned. Kiki, aren't you afraid that I'll leak it? Once someone finds out about such a shocking secret, it'll definitely be like thunder exploding, and the entire Tianling dynasty will fall into chaos. However, she actually told him without hiding anything. Chu Liyue asked in return. Would you do that? Of course not. Chang Wanzhou replied almost instinctively. Chu Liyue was extremely important to him. He once secretly swore in his heart that if he couldn't find that person, he would follow Chu Liyue for the rest of his life. For her, he would go through fire and water without fear of death. Chu Liyue chuckled. Then it's fine. She answered so matter-of-factly that Chang Wanzhou didn't know what to do for a moment. He understood that Chu Liyue intended to tell him her identity today. I believe you. Chu Liyue suddenly said softly. She once thought that after experiencing such a bitter betrayal, she would no longer be able to trust others the same way. However, that wasn't the case. Some people did choose to betray her, but at the same time, there was another group of people who chose to pledge their loyalty to her. She had lost everything, but she still had such a group of people who had always been with her and waiting for her. Chang Wanzhou had followed her for so long that he must have noticed that she was different from ordinary people in many ways. However, since she didn't say anything, he didn't ask and just followed her silently. Whether in life or death, he would always be by her side. Chang Wanzhou looked into those clear eyes and something seemed to surge in his chest. The blood in his body seemed to be flowing quickly, almost boiling. Let's go. A good show is about to begin. Chu Liyue blinked, then turned and walked forward. Chang Wanzhou clenched his fists and quickly followed. Chu Liyue opened the door and saw a familiar face. Chani. At this moment, her forehead was covered in sweat and her hair was a little messy. She looked like she had been running around for a long time. Chu Liyue was surprised. Miss Chani, why are you here? Chani looked at Chu Liyue in front of her, inwardly annoyed. However, Chani was someone who had seen the world, so her expression was still calm. She bowed and her voice was slightly cold. Miss Chu, you've made this servant look for you. After receiving the third princess's order, she personally came out to invite her. She first went to the Chongshu Pavilion, but the people at the Chongshu Pavilion said that she wasn't on the mountain. She then hurriedly found her way here. Chu Liwei didn't seem to hear the dissatisfaction and complaint in her voice. Miss Chani, why are you looking for me? And you seem to be in a hurry? Chani suppressed the anger in her heart and said, the third princess was very happy to hear that Miss Chu had returned safely, so she specially sent this servant to invite you to the palace. Chu Liwei wasn't the only one who had returned safely. Even a fool could guess why she had been invited alone. Chu Liwei nodded in understanding. So it's the third princess's order. I'm really sorry to trouble Miss Chani to come so far. I happen to be free, so let's go now. It's not good to make the third princess wait. Chani was stunned. She originally thought that Chu Liwei would refuse, but she didn't expect Chu Liwei to directly agree. However, this also saved her a lot of trouble, so she didn't think too much about it. Miss Chu, please. Chu Liwei nodded and turned to Chong Wanzhou. I'll be back soon. Chong Wanzhou nodded. Chu Liwei followed Chani with a smile. Then, let's go. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 853. Chu Liwei followed Chani into the palace. In Huayang Palace, Shangguan Wan was already impatient from waiting. She paced back and forth impatiently. The words she heard just now kept echoing in her ears. She originally thought that Chu Liwei was completely dead. She didn't expect him to come back alive. Moreover, he even made a contract with a mythical beast and even obtained the dancing lotus. It was fine if Chu Liwei was lucky enough to stumble upon the legendary fiend's matter by chance. But what was the deal with the dancing lotus? She still clearly remembered that when Elder Qiushi tried to obtain the dancing lotus, he was directly swallowed into the mirror lake. He didn't even have the chance to struggle and scream before he completely disappeared. Later on, Xianxia and the others also returned empty-handed. How did Chu Liwei do it? The more Shangguan Yu thought about it, the more annoyed she became. This feeling of being easily beaten by others was too familiar. In the past, when Shangguan Yu was still alive, he always suppressed her like this. No matter how hard she tried, how attentive and how she tried to please him, no one would spare her a second glance. In their eyes and hearts there was only Shangguan Yu. Shangguan Wan thought about what happened back then and gritted her teeth in hatred. One Shangguan Yu was enough. Now there was actually another Chu Liwei. She raised her hand and touched her face. As long as she finished what she had to do, there was no need to keep Chu Liwei. Because the next day was the day of the wedding, the palace was already decorated. Along the way there were lanterns and colored banners and it was very lively. As Chu Liwei walked in, she nonchalantly sized up the place. She could tell that Shangguan Wan was probably carrying out the ceremony according to the princess etiquette. Naturally, it couldn't be compared to her wedding back then. Although Shangguan Wan was bold, she didn't dare to step on her head so openly. However, these things for the wedding seemed to be newly made. She guessed that Shangguan Wan wouldn't be willing to use what she had left behind. However, Shangguan Wan definitely felt aggrieved that she had lost in this scale. Chu Liuyue's lips curled up. Soon the two of them arrived at Huayang Palace. Chani went forward and knocked on the door. Shangguan Wan's voice quickly came from inside. Then Chani walked out and invited Chu Liwei in. With a smile on her face, Chu Liwei agreed and walked in. Inside the room, Shangguan Wan was waiting. The moment she saw Chu Liuyue's and saw Chu Liuyue's eyes. When she saw that familiar face's face, S's frowned subconsciously. S's, the palace, third princess, how have you been? Chu Liwei stopped 5 steps away from Shangguan Wan and said with a smile. She didn't bow, nor was there any trace of humility on her face. It was as if she didn't place Shangguan Wan in her eyes at all. This made Shangguan Wan even more furious. She couldn't help but sneer. What? You've forgotten your etiquette after coming back from the great desolate swamp? Why aren't you bowing when you see this princess? Chu Liwei raised her brows slightly as if she had heard a joke. She laughed lightly. She said with a chuckle, Third princess, have you ever seen anyone in this world bow respectfully when they see someone who almost killed them? I still remember all the things you did to me in the mystic forest. Shangguan Wan choked. The situation back then was extremely dangerous. She was indeed partly responsible for Chu Liuyue's fall. There was no way she could deny this no matter what. Shang Wanwan's face turned cold. What? Are you here to settle accounts with this princess today? That's strange. Didn't you invite me here, third princess? Chu Liwei walked to a nearby chair very naturally and sat down leisurely. She rested her chin on one hand and said, even if I'm looking for trouble, shouldn't you be the one looking for me? Seeing Chu Liue's impudence, Shang Wanwan's face turned red with anger. How dare you? This is Huayong Palace. How dare you act so presumptuously? Chu Liwei raised her eyes and looked at her coldly. She sneered in her heart. Speaking of which, Shang Wanwan was only able to find a place to stay in Huayong Palace because of her help and pleading with Imperial Father. Now did she think that she was the rightful owner of this place? Ridiculous. You know very well why the third princess has asked me to come here. Could it be that third princess wants me to be deeply grateful to you at this very moment? If third princess doesn't like me, you can call people in right now and take me away for punishment. Wouldn't that be enough? Chu Liwei spoke very impolitely. She didn't put Shang Wanwan in her eyes at all. Shang Wanwan angrily pointed at Chu Liwei. Her face was green and white. You dare to threaten this princess? In the past 2 years, almost no one had dared to speak to her in such a tone. Chu Liwei leaned lazily on the chair and looked at Shang Wanwan with half-narrowed eyes. There was a hint of ridicule in her dark jade-like eyes. So what? So what? She had made up her mind that Shang Wanwan definitely wouldn't dare to call people in at this time. Unless she wanted to make a big scene and lose face on the day before the big wedding. As expected, Shang Wanwan looked at Chu Liwei angrily for a long time. In the end, she swallowed the rest of her words. Since that's the case, this princess won't beat around the bush with you. This princess wants your divine beast's blood and the dancing lotus. Imperial Father is seriously ill and only by relying on these can he hope to wake up. Imperial Father is the son of heaven. This is what you should do and it's also your honor. Of course, this princess won't let you give these things away for free. As long as you hand them over, this princess will immediately announce it to the world and give you a generous reward. If anyone else heard this, they would find it extremely laughable. The divine beast's blood and the dancing lotus. These 2 items were priceless treasures that were rarely seen in the world. Shang Wanwan's so-called generous reward was simply a joke in front of these 2 things. However, Chu Liwei didn't directly refuse when she heard this. Instead, there was a slight change in her expression. Third princess, if you want me to hand over these things to treat His Majesty's illness, I naturally have no objections. However, I have a request. Shang Wanwan looked at her suspiciously. What request? Chu Liwei said word by word. I want to personally visit His Majesty and give these things to His Majesty to consume. Impossible. Shang Wanwan didn't even think before rejecting. How could Clear Wind Palace be a place where Chu Liwei could enter? Chu Liwei smiled, but there was a trace of coldness in the corners of her eyes. This is originally mine. I want to see it used properly. It doesn't seem to be an excessive request, right? I am a celestial physician. Furthermore, if third princess doesn't trust me, then let another celestial physician do it. I'll just watch from the side. I only have this one request. If third princess doesn't agree, then there's no need for us to continue discussing. After saying this, Chu Liwei stood up and dusted her clothes as if she was about to leave. Wait. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 854. This consort will agree to your request. Shang Wanwan could only agree in the end after much consideration. Chu Liwei was extremely arrogant now that she had such a precious treasure in her hands. She would let her be smug for now. Once this matter was over, she would settle the old and new grudges together. Chu Liwei smiled. Third princess, wouldn't it have been fine if you had agreed earlier? After all, His Majesty's health is more important. Don't you think so? Shang Wanwan choked. She only felt that the Chu Liwei in front of her was truly an eyesore. Her expression was cold as she lowered her voice. You'd best behave yourself. Otherwise, this consort has plenty of ways to deal with you. Chu Liwei shrugged nonchalantly as she chuckled. Shang Wanwan then walked out first. Chani hurriedly bowed as she secretly glanced at the 2 of them. The anger on the third princess's face had yet to dissipate, while Chu Luiyue had a relaxed expression. It seemed like the conversation hadn't gone very smoothly. Go invite Mingxi over. Sheng Wanwan ordered coldly. Yes. Chani didn't dare to ask any more questions and immediately sent someone to do so. Sheng Wanwan turned to look at Chu Luiyue. You come with this consort to Clear Wind Hall. This wasn't the first time Chu Luiyue had entered the palace after her rebirth, but it was her first time coming to Clear Wind Hall. She had tried to come here before, but this place was heavily guarded and wasn't easy to approach, so she didn't act rashly. It could be seen that Sheng Wanwan placed great importance on Clear Wind Hall. Chu Luiyue knew very well that this definitely wasn't just because Imperial Father was here. She wanted Imperial Father to properly recuperate. There had to be some other reason for this place to be so heavily guarded that even the other members of the Imperial family found it difficult to enter. When the people of Clear Wind Hall saw that Sheng Wanwan had actually brought Chu Luiyue along, they were all shocked. When they heard that Sheng Wanwan wanted to let Chu Luiyue into the room to visit His Majesty, many people were even more shocked. It should be noted that on normal days, apart from the 3 celestial physicians on duty, only the third princess and eldest young master Jiang could freely enter this place. Chu Luiyue was actually allowed to enter, which was really shocking. However, when everyone thought about it, Chu Luiyue had a divine beast and a dancing lotus. It seemed to make sense for the third princess to invite her. Sheng Wanwan did not directly take Chu Luiyue in. Instead, she waited in the pavilion next to them, waiting for Zhou Mingxi to come. All sorts of gazes landed on Chu Luiyue. However, Chu Luiyue was already used to this and did not take it to heart at all. From the beginning to the end, he always had a demure and gentle appearance. Her words and actions were completely like that of a noble lady carefully nurtured by an aristocratic family. She was very generous and appropriate. It was very different from the aggressive appearance he had in the Huayang Palace. Vaguely, one could also hear the discussions of the servants. So that's Chu Luiyue. I've always heard of her, but today is the first time I've seen her. She really lives up to her reputation. Her charm and appearance are truly stunning. Coupled with her top-notch talent, it's really enviable. I heard that she came from an ordinary background, but now that she has contracted a divine beast and has such strength, the problem of her background is no longer a problem. Moreover, this imposing manner of hers really doesn't look like she came from a small family, especially that noble air between her eyebrows. Sheng Wanwan was also gritting her teeth as she watched from the side. The few times they had met before, Chu Luiyue was still very restrained. However, after returning from the mystic forest, it seemed that because he had something on her, he had become more and more unbridled. And now, in front of everyone, she had pretended to be a different person. It was really disgusting. Chu Luiyue didn't care about Sheng Wanwan's furious and jealous gaze. The main reason she came here today was to take a look at her father first. Even though Qi Han previously said that her father's health had improved a lot, she still felt uneasy without seeing it with her own eyes. Thinking of how her father had been imprisoned in Qingfeng Palace for 2 years and couldn't even get out of bed, Chu Luiyue's heart ached. Just like that, about an hour later, Zhou Mingxi hurried over. There was actually another person who came with him. Jiang Yuqing. Your humble servant is late. I hope that Your Highness the Third Princess will forgive me. Zhou Mingxi took a few steps forward and immediately bowed. Sheng Wanwan didn't have much reaction when she saw him, but when she saw Jiang Yuqing, she knitted her brows. Why are you here? Jiang Yuqing explained. Zhou Mingxi and I were in a similar situation. Previously, Officer Zhou and I happened to be together. When we heard the news from the palace, we were worried, so we decided to come together. Then his gaze turned slightly and it landed on Chu Luiyue. In actual fact, he originally didn't want to come, but after hearing from the palace servants that Sheng Wanwan had invited Chu Luiyue into the palace, he hesitated for a while and still followed. Ever since he hurriedly parted with her at the Lantern Festival that night, he hadn't seen her for the past few days. However, the scene from that day couldn't be erased from his mind. The more he thought about it, the more he wanted to see her again. Once this thought was born, it couldn't be erased. In addition, everyone in Xiling knew about the recent news of Chu Luiyue's legendary fiend bringing back the dancing lotus. Thus, the thought in his heart became even stronger. Chu Luiyue seemed to not notice his gaze as he bent his knees and bowed. Greetings, Eldest young master officer Zhou. The girl in front of him had skin as white as snow, and her eyes were bright. She didn't wear any makeup, but she was still beautiful and moving. Jiang Yuqing's heart tingled slightly. At the side, Shang Wanwan felt that something was amiss. The way Jiang Yuqing looked at Chu Liyue made her very uncomfortable. For some reason she suddenly remembered the painting that Jiang Yuqing hurriedly put away in the study that day. Uneasiness suddenly surged in her heart. Shall we go in and take a look at His Majesty's situation first? Chu Liyue broke the silence. Jiang Yuqing smiled and his voice was gentle. The alarm bells rang in Shang Wanwan's heart. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI Network. Chapter 855. A woman's intuition was always very accurate. Jiang Yuqing only said a few words to Chu Liyue, but it already made Shang Wanwan feel very uncomfortable. His tone was clearly different from when he spoke to her. Even his eyes seemed to have a trace of imperceptible gentleness. Shang Wanwan bit her lip. Could it be that Jiang Yuqing really had feelings for Chu Liyue? She clenched her hands in her sleeves and took a step forward. Her eyes were filled with anger. Tomorrow is the day of our wedding. According to the rules, we can't meet on the day before. Otherwise it would be inauspicious. Even if you're worried about Imperial Father, this consort is still in the palace. How can you come and go so casually? Did he not trust her, or did he not care about their marriage at all? Jiang Yuqing frowned when he heard this. You're thinking too much. How am I thinking too much? Shang Wanwan felt even angrier. Even if it's an ordinary person who enters into a marriage contract, they would try to avoid it the day before, let alone us. This was a tradition that had been passed down from the Tianling dynasty. Even if it was just for a good intention, Jiang Yuqing shouldn't have come to the palace at this time. Jiang Yuqing felt that Shang Wanwan was being unreasonable. It was just a meeting. What was the big deal? If he could live a good life, he would naturally live a good life. If he couldn't live a good life, it was useless no matter how much he trembled in fear and followed the rules of etiquette. Seeing that Shang Wanwan was becoming more and more aggressive, Jiang Yuqing's patience gradually ran out, and his expression turned cold. Since you value this rule so much, I'll leave now. After saying this, he really turned around and left with a wave of his sleeves. Jiang Yuqing, stop right there. Shang Wanwan didn't expect that Jiang Yuqing wouldn't give her any face. She only said a few words to express her dissatisfaction, but he actually turned around and left. And in front of so many people. In the past, even if he was unhappy, he would never treat her like this. However, Jiang Yuqing turned a deaf ear to this voice. He didn't even pause in his footsteps as he directly left. Anyone could see the decisiveness and coldness in his back as he left. Shang Wanwan's heart felt like it was on fire for a moment, but it also felt like ice water was poured on it for another moment. She was so angry that her whole body trembled. Wasn't she doing this for their future? In the end, he treated her like this. The atmosphere in the courtyard instantly dropped to the freezing point. The surrounding palace servants all lowered their heads, not daring to breathe loudly. The day before the wedding, the third princess and the eldest young master Jiang had an argument in the Qingfeng Palace, and they parted on bad terms. If this news were to spread, who knew what the people outside would say? Shang Wanwan gradually came back to her senses. Her face was red and white and she was extremely embarrassed. Zhou Mingxi looked embarrassed and didn't know what to do. Jiang Yuqing came here with him. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. Chu Liyue calmly stood to the side with her eyebrows slightly raised. It seemed like she didn't care about this matter at all. She knew best what kind of person Jiang Yuqing was. In his heart, the most important person was always himself. When would such a selfish person care about other people? Shang Wanwan should still like him. Otherwise, she wouldn't care so much about the meeting on the eve of the wedding. Unfortunately, Jiang Yuqing was too lazy to deal with her. Chu Liyue lowered her eyes and sneered in her heart. Now that things had turned out like this, who knew what kind of wonderful show would happen tomorrow? Shang Wanwan clenched her teeth and suppressed the anger in her heart with great difficulty. You too, come with this consort to visit Imperial Father. After saying this, she took the lead and walked inside. Chu Liyue and Zhou Mingxi followed closely behind. Inside the Qingfeng Palace it was very quiet. White mist lingered above the incense cauldron and a faint fragrance of ambergris spread out. Chu Luiwei wrinkled her nose. At that time Jian Fengqi had this smell on his body. She calmly looked inside. There was a person lying inside the golden muslin canopy. From here she could only see a blurry figure. But Chu Luiwei could still recognize at a glance. That person was Imperial Father. The tip of her nose turned sour and the rims of her eyes turned hot. In an instant, it was as if there was a surge of heat in her heart, almost overturning her. Back then, when she was forced into a dead end, she finally chose to commit suicide without properly saying goodbye to Imperial Father. Now that they met again, she had already become a different person. When she thought of how he had been lying here for 2 years, the bitterness and anger in Tu Liu's heart almost burst out of her chest. She used a great deal of strength to restrain her urge to rush forward. Shang Guanwan walked in front and had already reached the bedside. Lord Zhou, come and take a look at Imperial Father's condition first. Zhou Mingxi walked forward. He lifted a corner of the muslin canopy and pulled His Majesty's hand out, leaving only his wrist exposed. Then he carefully took His Majesty's pulse. After a moment he let go of His Majesty's hand. His Majesty's body hasn't fully recovered yet and is still unstable. If you want His Majesty to wake up, I'm afraid that he still needs to be nursed back to health. As he spoke he glanced at Chu Luiwei. If we can supplement it with the dancing lotus and the blood of mythical beasts, it would naturally be best. Everyone could guess why Shang Guanwan had asked Chu Luiwei to come over today. Therefore Zhou Mingxi simply said it directly. Shang Guanwan asked. Then Lord Zhou, are you confident that you can refine the pill for Imperial Father today? Zhou Mingxi chuckled. Your Highness may not know, but heavenly treasures like the blood of mythical beasts and the dancing lotus don't actually need to be refined into pills. You just need to boil some medicinal herbs together to make a decoction and take it directly. This will save you some time. Shang Guanwan heaved a sigh of relief and looked at Chu Luiwei. Young Miss Chu, please take the things out. Chu Luiwei took a few steps forward and stood still 3 steps in front of the bed. From here she could vaguely make out the outline of that familiar face. At this moment he seemed to be lying on the bed with his eyes tightly shut as if he was unconscious. She said, It's my honor to be able to use these things in exchange for His Majesty's health. Shang Guanwan frowned. For some reason she felt that Chu Luiwei seemed to have some feelings for Imperial Father. She couldn't put her finger on it, but she felt that it was an eyesore. Perhaps it was because Imperial Father could achieve meteoric success with this merit after he regained consciousness? When she thought of this, Shang Guanwan felt some disdain in her heart. Chu Luiwei took out a rectangular wooden box. Shang Guanwan and Zhou Mingxi's eyes lit up. Then Chu Luiwei opened the wooden box. A dancing lotus was lying quietly in the middle of it. 5 translucent pink and white petals were naturally closed. The stem was emerald green and full of vitality. It looked like it had just been plucked. Shang Guanwan's throat was a little dry and greed flashed in her eyes. This was the real dancing lotus. Chu Luiwei snapped her fingers and dumpling appeared on her shoulder. Shang Guanwan looked up and saw the red-tailed phoenix intimately rubbing Chu Luiwei's cheek, looking obedient and lovable. She hated it in her heart. All the good things had become Chu Luiwei's. Chu Luiwei seemed to be unaware and tapped Dumpling's head. Tuanzi, can I borrow a drop of blood from you? Love Network provided a better reading experience. Chapter 856. Dumpling nodded. Then she gently pricked her other paw with her claws, and a drop of dark red blood immediately gushed out. Then the drop of blood slowly floated up. Chu Luiwei reached out her hand, and the drop of blood quietly floated in the center of her palm. Upon closer inspection, it was faintly suffused with a layer of colorful light. A vast and mighty aura emanated from it. This was the divine beast blood of the red-tailed red phoenix. Shang Guanwan and Zhou Mingxi both looked at the 2 items in Chu Luiwei's hands with shock and anticipation. This was the only one in the entire Tianling dynasty. Many people might not be able to see it with their own eyes in their entire lives. However, it had appeared before their eyes just like that. Chu Luiwei's card box. Zhou Mingxi. Master Zhou, this should be enough, right? It's enough, it's enough. Zhou Mingxi came back to his senses and nodded repeatedly, unable to hide his excitement. As a celestial physician, he was already extremely happy to see such a rare treasure in the world. Now that he could personally boil it into a decoction, this was an even rarer opportunity. With these, I believe that Her Majesty's health will definitely improve as soon as possible. Chu Liwei nodded in satisfaction and handed over the wooden box and the drop of blood. Zhou Mingxi carefully took it. For safety's sake, he took out his own medicine cauldron and began refining. A ball of orange flame burned in the medicine cauldron. Zhou Mingxi threw in a few medicinal herbs one after another. When the refinement was almost complete, he cautiously threw in the dancing lotus. The clear and beautiful petals quickly curled up and then slowly melted, condensing into a snow-white water droplet. At first glance it looked like a small snowball. Finally, Zhou Mingxi put in dumpling's blood. The two water droplets began to slowly merge. After about 15 minutes, all the medicinal herbs in the medicine cauldron had completely merged. Because they weren't refining pills, it didn't cause too much of a commotion. However, the ball of decoction floating in the medicine cauldron emitted a faint aura. He was not to be underestimated. Zhou Mingxi's body was almost drenched in sweat, and his lips were slightly pale. It could be seen that in this short period of time he had consumed a lot of energy. Whether it was the divine beast's blood or the dancing lotus, they both contained extremely powerful energy. It was indeed not an easy task to harmonize the medicinal properties to the best possible level. In the end, Zhou Mingxi waved his sleeve and poured the medicine into a jade bowl. Shang Wanwan stood at the side, staring at the bowl of medicinal soup, ready to make a move. If the decoction could be used on myself, not only would her strength be greatly improved, even the scars on her face might be completely healed. Thinking of this, the desire in her heart grew even stronger. Unfortunately, there was only one dancing lotus and he had used it all just now. But the blood of a mythical beast. Wasn't Chu Liyue's red-tailed red phoenix still there? Your Highness. Zhou Mingxi handed over the bowl of medicinal soup. Would you please feed it to His Majesty? Shang Wanwan lowered her eyes to take a look, and only then did she regain her senses. She nodded and took the bowl. Taking a step forward, she lifted the muslin curtain and sat by the bed. Chu Liyue looked up, wanting to see Imperial Father's face. Unfortunately, Shang Wanwan blocked her view so she couldn't see clearly. Her heart trembled slightly, but she still withdrew her gaze, hiding the longing and worry in her eyes. With this medicine, Imperial Father's body should be able to improve greatly. The reason why she had purposely released the news and insisted on watching with her own eyes was to ensure that Imperial Father would be safe. Now she could finally relax a little. On the other side, after Shang Wanwan fed a few mouthfuls of the medicine, she turned back to look at the two. This consort will take care of things here. You can leave first. Zhou Mingxi responded and was about to leave, but Chu Liyue said with a faint smile, Today, I don't have any urgent matters to attend to. Anyway, I don't have anything important to do today, so I'll just stay here and see how His Majesty is doing after taking the medicine. After all, it came from me. If I leave now and something happens in the future, I really won't be able to explain myself. Third Princess, don't you think so? Hearing this, Zhou Mingxi, who was just about to leave, stopped. That's right. He was the one who refined this medicine. What if something happened? Then this humble subject will also wait here? Zhou Mingxi said tentatively, then stood to the side. Shang Wanwan was furious. She had originally wanted to send the two of them away so that she could take the remaining half of the medicine for herself. But now it seemed that she couldn't. Under the gazes of the two, Shang Wanwan could only obediently feed the rest of the medicine to Imperial Father. Finally, she placed the empty bowl to the side and said indifferently, All right, the medicine is finished. All right, the medicine has been used up. Let Imperial Father rest first. Chu Liyue glanced at Imperial Father and vaguely saw that Imperial Father's complexion was much better. She felt slightly relieved. Since His Majesty has used the medicine, then if there's nothing else, I won't disturb you any longer. With that, she turned to leave. Wait. However, Shang Wanwan suddenly spoke up and stopped her. This consort has something to discuss with you in a bit. Without waiting for Chu Liyue to reply, Shang Wanwan glanced at Zhou Mingxi again. It's best if there's someone watching Imperial Father. I'll have to trouble Lord Zhou to stay here for a while. Zhou Mingxi hurriedly said. This humble subject will naturally do his best. Sheng Guanwan walked out. When she brushed past Chu Luiwei, she gave her a meaningful look. Follow this consort. Chu Luiwei narrowed her eyes and followed. The two left Clear Wind Palace's main hall and arrived at a side hall. The moment they entered, Chani tactfully closed the door. Chu Luiwei turned to look at the closed door and smiled. Third princess, what are you doing? Sheng Guanwan raised her chin slightly and ordered from above. This consort wants your divine beast's blood. Chu Luiwei had already guessed what she wanted to do, so she raised her brows without any shock. Third princess should know that it's not an easy task to condense a divine beast's blood that contains the power of a bloodline, right? Dumpling already offered one earlier. If I give it to you now, I'm afraid that I'll suffer from a loss of blood. Sheng Guanwan sneered. Chu Luiwei, don't play dumb in front of this consort. Back when this consort's face was scratched by this beast, this consort was already being especially merciful by not pursuing the matter of you and it. If you know what's good for you, you'd best obediently offer up the divine beast's blood right now. If it weren't for the fact that this red-tailed phoenix had already been contracted and couldn't change its master, she would definitely have snatched this divine beast as well. Chu Luiwei looked at her with her arms crossed and one hand lightly tapped her chin. Your words aren't without reason. After all, appearance is extremely important to any woman. Tomorrow is your wedding day. It's not good to have a face covered in scars. Besides, you can hide it for a while, but you can't hide it forever. Your true appearance will eventually be exposed for the world to see. Don't you think so? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 857. Sheng Guanwan's heart suddenly trembled. Chu Luiwei's words were like a sudden clap of thunder that exploded in her ears. She immediately felt guilty and looked at Chu Luiwei in bewilderment. Was there a hidden meaning behind his words? However, Chu Luiwei's eyes were curved and he didn't seem to be implying anything. Sheng Guanwan's heart felt like it was suffocating and she didn't know what to do. Just tell me, are you going to give me the mythical beast's blood or not? Chu Luiwei said with a smile. Third princess wants it, so how can I not give it to her? Dumpling. She turned to look at Dumpling, who was nestled on her shoulder. It had already curled up into a ball and turned its head away, looking very disgusted. Not to mention that this blood was very precious to it. Even if it didn't want it, it wouldn't be willing to give it to Sheng Guanwan. Chu Luiwei coaxed it a little, and Dumpling reluctantly offered up another blood bead. Sheng Guanwan's eyes lit up. The blood bead hovered in the palm of her hand. Chu Luiwei said, Third princess, it's not impossible for you to have it, but you have to take out something of equal value in exchange. Sheng Guanwan sneered disdainfully. At the end of the day, Chu Luiwei just wants something. What do you want? Chu Luiwei's lips curled up slightly. I'll tell you what I want tomorrow. I hope that third princess won't be stingy when the time comes. Sheng Guanwan frowned slightly. Tomorrow is my wedding day. I won't have time to deal with you then. Chu Luiwei's eyes seemed to flash. That's what I need to think about. Sheng Guanwan didn't care. She had a lot of things to do at the wedding tomorrow. A mere Chu Luiwei wouldn't even have the right to talk to her. She had nothing to worry about. This consort agrees. Chu Luiwei smiled and nodded. With a flick of his finger, the blood bead flew towards Sheng Guanwan. Since that's the case, I'll first wish third princess a smooth marriage and a blissful marriage with young Master Jiang. With that, Chu Luiwei did not stay any longer and turned around to leave. Sheng Guanwan hurriedly grabbed the blood bead and impatiently swallowed it. In an instant, it seemed as if a flame had ignited in his chest. Sheng Guanwan hurriedly took off the mask. An itchy and numb feeling came from the wound on her face. His entire body felt like it was surrounded by flames, scorching and painful. Sheng Guanwan clenched her teeth tightly, forcing herself to endure this torture. As long as his appearance could be restored to normal, this was nothing. Chu Luiwei left Clear Wind Hall, his footsteps light. Dumpling had already returned to her body. Not bad. Chu Luiwei praised in her heart. Dumpling flapped its wings with a proud look in its eyes. Chu Luiwei saw its reaction and couldn't help laughing. He turned around to take a look. From here she could only see the eaves of the hall. At this time, Sheng Guanwan should be impatiently swallowing the blood of the divine beast, right? She wondered if Sheng Guanwan would be satisfied with this small gift. After pausing for a moment, Chu Luiyue continued to walk forward. When she passed by a junction, Chu Luiyue turned and walked in another direction. The palace servant behind her hurriedly said, "Young Miss Chu. You can't go there." Chu Luiyue paused in her steps and then suddenly realized, "Look at me, I actually got the wrong direction." With that, she turned around and walked in another direction. The palace servant smiled apologetically. "You haven't entered the palace many times, so it's normal that you don't know the way. It's just that in the future you have to be more careful and don't go there casually." The news that Chu Luiyue had entered the palace to offer medicine and treat His Majesty had quietly spread in the palace. Everyone guessed that if there were no accidents, this person's identity would definitely be extraordinary in the future. Thus they scrambled to curry favor with her. Chu Luiyue smiled and asked seemingly unintentionally, "Oh? Why is that?" The palace servant looked conflicted, but in the end he lowered his voice and whispered, "That's the Imperial Ancestral Hall. It was burned down 2 years ago and has just been repaired. Ordinary people can't go there." Chu Luiyue nodded as if she understood. "I see. Thank you." The palace servant was flattered and repeatedly thanked her. On the way he talked about the various rules of the palace and some gossip. Chu Luiyue listened to one by one and gradually realized that Shangguan seemed to be very concerned about the burned ancestral hall. From a certain point of view she was even stricter than guarding His Majesty. At that time she chose to go there. The ancestral hall should have been badly burned and no evidence was left. What was Shangguan afraid of? After leaving the palace, Jiang Yuqing went straight back to the Jiang mansion. But until now the anger in his heart had not completely dissipated. When he thought of Shangguan's unreasonable and aggressive appearance, he felt a burst of irritation in his heart. What made him even more anxious was that when Chu Luiyue heard the two of them arguing, she was completely indifferent. She was like an outsider, calmly watching a play that had nothing to do with her. From beginning to end she didn't look at him at all and her expression didn't change at all. Jiang Yuqing pressed his chest. For some reason when he thought of this his chest felt very tight. He closed his eyes as if he had suddenly made up his mind and said to Sun Qi, who was following behind him, "Go and ask Chu Luiyue to go to the zither room in Exenli Garden." Sun Qi was stunned. "Eldest young master, you are... Tomorrow was the wedding with the third princess. What did eldest young master want to do by asking Chu Luiyue at this time?" Moreover, it was in the zither room in Thousand View Garden. Jiang Yuqing coldly glanced at him. Sun Qi immediately said, "Your subordinate will go right away. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.